I'll use that.
Yeah.
It's good.
How are you today?
Good. Thanks for doing all this. Appreciate
Absolutely.
it. This is wonderful.
Pleasure. Amy, my bud.
Yeah. Okay, everybody, if you want to grab a seat, we'll get started. Right now, and I'm sure it'll change as times go, we have 59 online. So we're going to forego introductions because we'll never get to the calendar. But there are a lot of people that I haven't seen in a long time. There's people that haven't seen each other despite being on committees. So please take time afterwards to linger, introduce yourself, set up lunches, give homework, all that stuff that I like to do. So really excited to have you all here. And I just want to start with some thank yous at first. I wanted to thank Denise Robinson, who's CEO, and Linda James, who's Chief Operating Officer, for offering this space. We've been at different spaces. The State Library did not have very good Zoom capacity. We've met at Department of Public Safety, which is a cavern, so it doesn't look like many people are there. One of the rules of politics I learned is you need a room smaller than the number of people you expect, so you look like you're a success, so this is a little bit better. And so I thank you for offering the services of this at free parking, which is nice. And then Pete and Donna Miller, who have been with me for, I don't know, decades now, it seems like, through campaigns and do All My Things Veteran, and they tape all of these, and they put them on a website. Maybe I'll have Dr. Gordish send that website out to everybody, or I'll put it in my newsletter. It's elstrattonconsulting.net.org, and it has everything. It has all the videos over the multitudes of years. It has all the veterans videos. It has all the newsletters for AG Task Force, the infographics, you name it, it's on that website. I have nothing to do with it. I know not how to operate it. When they fully retire for the 20th time, unless I find some young smart thing that knows how to do all that stuff, it will go with them. But thank you for all you do, and they're taping this so it can also be recorded for the future. We have some wonderful co-chairs this year. There is a list of co-chairs in the back if you would like to grab it, the list of co-chairs, and there's also a infographic on the Attorney General Task Force, because at the end we're going to hear reports from as many of the 15 committees as we can. It might run us a little bit later, but I hope you can stay. And if you see what you might like to join, there's a booklet with the 4-year report, and then there's an AG Task Force infographic that lists the 15 committees. Carolyn Bevins, who's way in the back, runs the committee lists and the information and gets the newsletters out to those members. So we'd like to have you join other committees too if you are interested and like. But we have 4 co-chairs who have been just amazing in putting this together. First we have Dr. Gordish, who is going to come up in a little bit. She is the Director of Forensic Services. She is a doer. She is amazing. I love working with her. And Judge Brannon, who's the probate judge from Montgomery County, Judge Brannon, he's been amazing. He has done something we've been trying to do for years, literally years, and that is get the Probate Judges Association to do some forms for AOT, which we'll talk about later. So that is the Competency Restoration Committee that is putting this on. And then we have a second committee, Psychiatry and Treatment, and that is Dr. Stankowski, who's right there. Wave your hand, you'll see her present later. And she is the Assistant Medical Director for OMAS. And then we have Dr. Adam Sorensen, who is the Mental Health Director for the Logan and Champaign Board. And all these guys are just major doers. And then Dr. Hunter could not be with us, but he has been probably the longest continuing co-chairs of any committee I've had, way back when I was with the court, and then he chaired the Veterans Committee for a long time. He co-chaired this committee for a long time, and then he's gone to senior advisor status because of some issues and complications with his work. So we want to thank him for his long service as well. Just want to give you a real brief summary of what got us here. Melissa Knopp, who's over there, and Betsy Johnson, who's going to be presenting, and I started working on this decades ago, literally decades ago. And Melissa started one of the first AOT courts in the state, along with Summit County. And when she got to the court and became head of specialized dockets, she found out that a lot of courts didn't do AOT because they didn't think they could. So that was stage one. We got the statute amended to make it clear that all judges could do AOT courts. The second step was we tried to put together ability to divert and get people into treatment instead of prosecuting them when they had low-level offenses. We worked on this for a long time. Prosecutors would not sign off on it because we didn't have AOT courts or any alternative. And most prosecutors said we'd rather have them in and off the street for 6 months than leave them out with no treatment and no alternative. So that didn't work. And OMAS was involved with us in trying to get that. I think it was Dr. Hurst was one of the group partners on that one. So then we went forward, and then we started working on a competency restoration statute. And we had Senator Gavarone was the one who helped approached us originally about this statute, and we had a huge committee work on it and work on it and work on it. We had 23 versions of the statute before we finally decided we really needed to pass it and then try to fix it afterwards. And it allows prosecutors to dismiss and send to an AOT court for treatment, and we fixed a lot of things like the ability of probate to communicate with the trial court and the criminal court and the prosecutors. And then there's a committee right now that Dr. Gordish is heavily involved in, and lots of you in this room are involved in, that are working on a couple fixes to the statute, so stay tuned for that. And then Betsy Johnson, who has absolutely been the leader in AOT and tirelessly, and every time I do a Stepping Up meeting, she presents and trying to get it going, will be slowly stepping back, and they wanted to institutionalize this. So I approached the Supreme Court and said, hey, can we take AOT back into the Supreme Court? Because judges have to be at the center of an AOT court. If you don't have a judge, you don't have an AOT court. And so I met with the director, and he was very interested. I talked to the Chief Justice, and then we had Judge Brannon, who actually engaged the Probate Association to write forms. And so now we've got judges with a central group that can give them guidance, give them standardization. Very important, because otherwise we're just having one here, one there, one just all over the place. And all of that happened right before we did our February steering committee meeting, at which the governor met with his staff and found out that there were so many beds, even worse, being taken up with forensic cases, and announced at the meeting he's putting a task force together. And it was wonderful it happened when it did, because all these other things all were coalescing like the couple weeks right before that. So I am so excited there's going to be this task force, which is hard at work. And it's got some oomph because it's got the governor backing it up, plus many people in this room are on that committee. And so I'm really excited for that, and I think I'm hoping we can get a little update on what's happening with that. So I am going to make sure I got everything on this list. I'm going to now turn it over to the Attorney General. Unfortunately, he could not be here in person, but he was willing to put together a little video for us. He's co-chair with me on this committee. He approached me when Mike DeWine became governor and asked to continue the task force. Then we went from 10 committees to 15. Been a great partner. Michael Sheeline and Carrie Hertel have been amazing partners with me at the AG's office. And then Carolyn Bevins in the back is the one that just kind of runs everything and keeps it all going. So is that Carrie back there? I can't see very well. Yeah, there's Carrie. So I'm going to now have the video played before I turn it over to Dr. Gordish.
Hi, I'm Ohio Attorney General Dave Yost. I want to welcome all of you to this meeting of our Task Force on Criminal Justice and Mental Illness. All of you are helping to make sure that mental health is not only a front burner concern for the state of Ohio, but that it's not about statistics. It's about people, because mental health ultimately isn't a number. It's something that resides in a person, a human being, one at a time. It's about our neighbors, our friends and families. Really, it's about all of us. Each of you, representing different practices and communities across Ohio, plays a crucial role in shaping the landscape of our mental health care in this state. We recognize that our law enforcement officers and our jails are often forced to be the first responders to people with mental illnesses. Their actions can have a profound impact on the lives of those that they serve. And we recognize that time in lockup, even if it's a necessary step along the way, does not serve as a de facto mental health facility, or an alternative to actual treatment and actual compassion and care. You're all helping us with our goal of diverting individuals with mental health issues away from the criminal justice system where appropriate, and always toward the care and resources that they deserve. The work of this task force is also helping us focus on how to equip individuals to live fulfilling lives after the criminal justice system is done. Our returning citizens who have paid their debt to society and deserve a path back. It means ensuring access to quality mental health care, stable housing, employment opportunities, and support networks. It's about a pathway to success and empowerment and hope. Thank you to all of you who serve on this task force, and especially to my dear friend Justice Stratton, for your dedication, your passion, and your commitment to bettering the resources of our partners and social service agencies that serve those who are least able to deal with the trauma and confusion and chaos around them. As we delve into today's topics, let's remember the importance of an all-encompassing approach to human wellness. An approach that addresses immediate needs and focuses on long-term solutions. Now let's remember the critical role that each one of us plays in creating a more just, equitable, inclusive, and compassionate society for Ohioans. When I took the oath of office the first time as a statewide elected official, the Bible that I swore my oath on was open to Micah 6:8, which says, "He has shown thee what is good and what's required of you, to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly." Thank you so much for being here today. I hope you have a great conference.
I'm going to talk about outpatient competency restoration, and I have with me Michael Wente, who is the program director of one of the outpatient competency restoration programs in Ohio at NetCare Forensic Services. So Ohio has done and has had the capacity to do outpatient competency restoration really for quite some time. It just wasn't an organized effort, and there wasn't funding behind it. So there were a scattering of programs around Ohio, just a few, that were often locally supported, sometimes through funds, through their local ADAM board or other sources. Twin Valley Behavioral Health Care had run an outpatient competency restoration program really starting back 20, 25 years ago, and really served as a nice pilot to see what could be done in the community. After Senate Bill 2 had passed, there then became some GRF funding to upstand and serve the state of Ohio with outpatient competency restoration services. And with that funding, we had to figure out an infrastructure to have the availability of this service out to all the courts in Ohio. So with that funding, 10 programs were organized around the state, and most of them would serve a catchment area of counties. Now, to serve a catchment area and to serve some of the rural communities where there isn't high volume, there had to be a way to get those services out to individuals. So with the really uptick in telehealth and telehealth services, that's really how these programs operate, is that combination of either in-person and or telehealth. The next fiscal year, we really worked on developing these programs, some marketing materials, making sure the courts are aware they exist, and some of the parameters around them. And this last year, really looking at refining those processes, serving more individuals, and improving those programs. So we have some really preliminary data. This is 5 quarters worth of data for the outpatient competency restoration programs around Ohio. As of, I believe the slide was put together about a month or two ago, and we were at 350 individuals that had been served in the outpatient programs since the fall of 22. About 50% restoration rate, and you can see the blue and the orange delineate the difference of charges, the orange being those with misdemeanor charges and the blue being those with felony charges. So although the programs are there and really got their funding related to SB2 and those nonviolent misdemeanor cases, it doesn't restrict it to just misdemeanor cases. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Michael Wente to go a little deeper with you into one of these programs, what they do, who they serve, how they serve, and give you the details.
Thank you, Lisa. My name is Michael Wente. I'm the manager of Outpatient Competency Restoration at NetCare's Forensic Center. We started our program on July 1st of last summer. I joined, about 1 year exactly to the day from now. So we got about 2 months in advance of launching our program and spent the majority of that time reaching out to the courts, trying to communicate to everybody that after 2.5 decades, Twin Valley was no longer the original provider, and now we're taking over. There were some sluggish responses to that, so we've learned how to reinitiate this information as we go. We're really learning how to launch some new information to some new sources in a short amount of time. Currently, we're serving 96 defendants, or 96 have been served and ordered to OCR. We're serving 17 counties. Our current caseload is 32 defendants. All of this information outside of the counties is now inaccurate. It was provided on Monday, and our total caseload is now like 103, and our active cases is 38. So if that doesn't sum up OCR in the last year, I don't know who it really does. We took over additional counties from another forensic center because there was a manpower shortage, which really showed us how, as a system, we have to adapt and work together so that these services can be provided. Dr. Gordich was instrumental in connecting some dots and helping us directly connect with the courts themselves, and again, another example of problem solving on the fly. Before we started, our first plan was we got to talk to everybody who has a hand in the cookie jar. So we met with all the local ADAM boards who were overseeing counties that we were originally assigned. We're starting to implement those same conversations with some of the counties that we've added. We met with all of the outpatient agencies that we think are going to be primary players in these games. A little harder in Franklin County when we have such a large source of outpatient services. But in some of the smaller surrounding counties, BHP in Licking County is the king of all kings. So it makes it a little easier to connect with the one agency that might be overseeing the services these people are receiving when they're not in the correctional setting. Access to wellness. I owe Dave Foreman a shout out here for helping me become a member of the advisory committee. And Access to Wellness is a specialized group of funds, basically wraparound support services for people using multiple systems within our adult care system. So we've already had a whole lot of referrals. I don't even know the data on those. Lisa, you might have a better idea, because what I've seen is I send the referral and then the action team who actually knows what they're doing takes it and runs. So we do have a lot of people now aware of OCR and the expansion of OCR falling into the criteria of some new money that's available for service. We've met with Department of Developmental Disabilities. What I learned was that the CDC is also providing competency restoration to people who are on their residential facility. So we've used some of their ideas to work with some of our maybe lower intellectual functioning defendants, and now some of their concepts are implemented into our programming. We've met with as many people as you can imagine in the court. I don't have to name all the different titles. Court administrators, probation departments, public defenders, prosecutors, members and administrators of specialized dockets. It is very surprising how many people contact me who I've never heard of, who have very important roles and have helped us learn what different resources for support are out there. One of the biggest things is we at NetCare complete a lot of front-end and initial competency evaluations, and with the change of SB2 and the change of who falls into this new OCR category, well, it opens up a lot of options and a lot of questions for our evaluators. I should shout out John Tilley. I think I saw him around here. Dr. Tilley has been very helpful in, in tolerating my constant outreach to pick his brain. Dr. Tilley completes all the front-end evaluations for Franklin County Muni Court, so everybody he recommends ends up in my program. So one of the first things we wanted to do was, hey, John, who do you see as appropriate? Who do we see as inappropriate? How do we prove that we know what we're talking about? So the idea is we're creating a data stream so we can try to identify some of those early indicators of who might likely be restored. For our programming highlights, one of the first things that I personally took offense to was we need to redo the documentation for the OCR program to make it more valuable to our evaluators and to our courts. If somebody's going to be in a program that's court ordered, why would we not make our documentation mirror something that should also be subpoenaed and have some value to the case? So we spent a lot of time recreating how we want to do everything. We used resources that Dr. Gordish and Dave at Twin Valley helped us with using their OCR manual on the inpatient side. We used a bunch of different resources that's out there and kind of created or picked and choose what we felt was most applicable to the outpatient setting. So we created a whole different workbook that really targets just the specific elements of competency that we're looking to restore. Sometimes people will come in and they don't need to know what their charges are. They're very well aware and they're happy to talk to you about them. What they can't do is rationally make any decisions based on that information. So we're not spending any time on the factual stuff. We're going to focus on the areas of deficiencies in their competency. What we started doing was creating a referral form that specifically outlines all of the documentation we're going to ask for from our referring courts. We wanted to standardize the process because what we learned was things like start dates for the restoration period. Different counties function different ways, and if we're going to create a system for the statewide, we probably got to get some uniformity going. So our whole goal was get it in writing first from the court, because now the court is directing all of us. Now we have something to respond to, and now we don't have to try to ask along the way or make up the date and hope that it's right. From there, when we receive the referral, we reach out to defendants and we conduct an initial competency assessment ourselves. Seems a little redundant. You know, if Dr. Tilley is seeing this person 1 week before I'm now seeing them in OCR for their intake, what's the point? Well, the point is we've seen a lot of differences in a short amount of time on cases that we anticipated might show a little more stability. I'm thinking of a couple examples where I know one case, there was a highly educated person who Dr. Tilley saw on the initiation of medications. Some of those delusions were still intact. A week later when I get them, they are ready to go for their evaluation. So perfect summary of who fits in and how things change. We had another one. Oh, I don't know if this still works.
Uh-oh.
There we go. We had another one where the person was very, very, very stable. Again, I see them a week later, and the person found a little bit of meth. Very different presentation. They didn't show up to their appointment and ended up getting pink slips. So what we're seeing is we want to reinitiate an evaluation to see, all right, what are their present day deficiencies, and then compare those. Because what it's going to show us is maybe what are the moving parts of their competency status. From there, after we initially meet with the individual, we'll assign them to groups to learn all of the factual elements of competency. And the reason we do this is, man, this material is just not that engaging. It's very hard to get somebody who might be having, maybe some emotional instability to focus on me talking about their charges for an hour. A lot more topics come up when you have a lot of other individuals. And most of the research indicates that the factual elements can be learned in group settings. When we feel like they have a grasp on those elements, we're going to move them into rational, individualized sessions. And now the rational topics would be things like, can you work with your attorney? Can you participate in meaningful dialogue to make well-informed decisions about, the future of your case? Does your perception of or version of events in question have reality-based insights, or are you able to rationally make decisions despite perhaps some delusional content or misinformation? From there, we every week have we have consultations with my leadership, Dr. Shannon Porter, Dr. Meredith Beltry. They're the forensic directors of NetCare's Forensic Center. So every week, I'm independently licensed myself, but I'm speaking with the experts who actually know what they're doing, and we're adjusting the plan as we go. Our whole concept was one size does not fit everybody because my competence and your competence do not mirror each other. So that moves us, here's a good slide. Yeah, this is the tool that we use, kind of our first assessment. I just wanted to throw it up there so you guys could see how we're outlining what does the front-end evaluation point out in terms of competency deficiencies and what do we see. More often than not, we're seeing them mirror each other. When we see differences, boy, are they drastic and impactful. So it kind of leads us into the conversation of who are good candidates for OCR. The easy answers are they're linked with treatment, they're medication compliant. This one has been surprisingly new to some people in the system. We need their contact information. We need to know where to find them, and if not, who is the person that's going to help them the most that we can then contact. If you don't know how to find them, there's no chance I'm going to find them. Can they get to appointments? If they're in Franklin County, we require that they attend first in person so that we can make the determination that they would be appropriate to manage these visits in outpatient settings, or in virtual visits, I should say. Do they have appropriate devices to attend those virtual visits? I am not trying to speak to you for an hour through your cell phone. That's probably not that appropriate, and I'm highly doubting any judges are going to be on board for that. So we require a tablet, we require a laptop, and you have to be alone. Those are the big ones. Do they have supportive family and collateral contacts? This one seems like maybe it shouldn't be that big of a deal, but you would be surprised how much we can do with a heads up from a family member saying maybe this guy's decompensating, they need to go to the hospital, and how we can work with the court to ensure that that's not used against their competency restoration status. Questionable candidates, the exact opposite. If they're not taking medications and we see psychiatric acuity, especially in lower or shorter periods of competency restoration, it's going to be low odds of success. What we often have to do in those moments is let the court know, hey, these visits are no longer productive. We want the court to tell us what to do. We're happy to move forward with an evaluation early, but it's going to be an evaluation where the person essentially can't participate in the restoration process. Inconsistent contact information. I'm sure this is shocking to everybody, but defendants love to change their cell phone numbers so you can't find them. It happens all the time. So we ask for email addresses, get some pretty hilarious email addresses considering we're kind of a legal program. People are very courageous in what they're willing to put out there. Homelessness, you know the game. I don't have to elaborate a whole lot on homelessness. Limited social supports, same thing. Previous failed attempts at OCR. This one is less of a questionable candidate to me today, and I'll share a little bit at the end. But if somebody has recurrently shown that they're not going to comply, that they're too sick to participate, that OCR essentially doesn't work for them, then maybe that's not the best person to refer again. So going back, we offer in-person and virtual options. One of the first things I wanted to do when we joined, and my leadership allowed me to kind of throw out this idea, was to implement a system using an online appointment reminder tool where we can send appointment reminders directly to your cell phone, to your email address, 72 hours, every 24 hours leading up to your appointment. It confirms the delivery of those appointment details, and the whole point was, well, I need to prove to the court that I'm actually doing what I'm telling the court that I'm doing, but we also got to prove that the defendant is it. So this is a way that we can show, no, you had the information. You are the only reason you didn't come. So that was step one. Step two is, again, I already mentioned this, we require in-person visits for defendants in Franklin County. These people are also in outpatient settings. They have lives to live. So we will work around with them, with appropriate considerations. I'm not going to see you Saturday at 8 a.m. if that's the only time you can make it. But we do try to work around people's lives. They're not in a jail, they're not in a correctional facility. That doesn't mean they're doing anything wrong. Non-Franklin County residents, obviously we're not going to make them travel to see us, especially if they're sentenced out of a county that isn't Franklin County. So we do prioritize video visits in those instances. What we've really seen is Hocking County does not have the internet service that we have here in Franklin County. Same with Fairfield County. So we've leaned on different court partners, probation officers specifically, who have helped us host visits at their court buildings for OCR candidates or defendants in their courts. So it's a lot of help that we're receiving. I wouldn't say we're initiating it, but we're certainly benefiting from it. Requirements for video visits, you gotta have internet, no cell phones, you have to use a tablet or a computer. And one of the reasons we make those stipulations is access to wellness can be used to fund purchasing those devices for these individuals. So there's not, if you say you only have a cell phone, well, let me refer you somewhere where we can make sure that this, goes a little bit more smoothly. Have to have quiet, alone space. We've had defendants take visits, one with Dr. Porter, who she was going to do an evaluation for one of my people who I said was ready early, and the guy takes the call from his doctor's office. It's probably not gonna work out. They have to dress right, and they have to behave right. We treat it like it's court, and people get a mixed message, understandably so, that if they're at their house, they don't have to maybe function as professionally or as put together as they would if they're in front of a judge. What that doesn't mean is you don't have to wear a shirt, or you're allowed to eat your lunch throughout the whole visit, or you can have the TV on or play some video games or smoke cigarettes the whole time. So when we're making considerations for who would be appropriate for video, we have to make considerations for who's willing to take this seriously. So what's working? What we kind of figured was the lack of communication seemed to be a theme from both the OCR provider side and the court side. And one of the first things we started out to do was get rid of that lack of communication. So the easiest way to do that for me was step one, let you know when I receive a referral. You wouldn't believe how much that helps. And the reason that helps is maybe they didn't send us all the information. Nothing like sitting on a file with nothing to do and then realizing you couldn't do anything if you had all the information. So we're aware of errors early. It helps us and the court be on the same page with what is the actual start date for OCR. A lot of people think it can be the date it's ordered or referred. Okay, we're at the court's direction when it comes to this. Some counties treat it as the first day they participate in our program. It's fine with us, as long as we're on the same page. We work for the court. So we just want to make sure that we have uniformity across our timelines. And with that, dictating the restoration timeline dictates our submission dates. We have to have our reports submitted within 10 days for municipal court cases, within 14 days for common pleas cases. Well, if the court doesn't give us a sure date, we're not exactly sure when to submit it. So now we run into issues like, well, why was this report submitted? Is it early? No, not from our side of things. But if we're not on the same page, unnecessary questions like that arise. Next, we notified defense counsel within 7 days. Now, these timelines are primarily in place for municipal court cases because we only have 60 days, more often than not 60 days for restoration. Within a week, if we're not having any success reaching the defendant, we're going to ask defense counsel, for assistance. We're not trying to throw anybody under the bus. We're asking for help. Like, hey, can we get this person so that we can keep them in the program? If defense isn't having any success, we're notifying the court, but we're asking the court for direction. What we don't want to do is tell the court what we're going to do, because that's not how this works. But we also don't want to, sabotage the case if we haven't been able to provide services. Kind of a good rule of thumb is if they haven't participated, who says it doesn't work? So what we want to do is let the court know that we haven't been able to do our part, should the court elect to make any adjustments to maybe increase our likelihood of success.
Am I going on here?
Sorry?
Next slide?
No, we're okay.
No, we're good? Okay.
Yep, we're good. So kind of moved into my next point. We're very vocal and quick to communicate anything impeding our provision of services during the restoration period. If somebody is psychiatrically ill, we're notifying the court and we're pausing everything. Because if you think about it, that could be a violation of their rights. If they can't appropriately participate, we need to clinically get them to a position or into services that might enable their participation in outpatient. We've had people hospitalized during the restoration period, discharge, come right back in, and now they're competent. Maybe not the way that we would design it as a community, but that does also look like a program working. We've had people who have had cases dismissed because they're at their final competency evaluation and now they're getting pink slips straight to the hospital. So there's a nice mix of everything in between. This also becomes helpful when maybe we're seeing behavioral issues. Me telling somebody I'm going to notify the court that they're non-compliant doesn't really do anything. The court saying that they're being viewed as non-compliant does a whole lot more. So part of this is to give the court the information that we have so that they, weaponize isn't the right word, but they can utilize that information to maybe support more optimal outcomes. So again, why does all this matter? We're looking for support from the court. We're not looking to violate people. We're looking for help getting people in our program and keeping them here, because what we're seeing is it's working. We have opportunities to intervene along the way. I'll outline an example about psychiatric treatment compliance in NetCare's new outpatient behavioral health clinic later in the visit. But the whole point of that little seed being planted is we had a defendant who really needed some psychiatric meds. We wanted to do an early evaluation because visits were not productive, and that kind of led to our supervised, not mandated or ordered or forced medications in an outpatient setting. Okay, re-referrals. This is a funny story. Dr. Gorsh and I were talking about this before this presentation. I hope this is okay to share. Initially, I had reached out to Dr. Gorsh a couple weeks ago complaining about cases being referred back to me. This person didn't comply. Why are they coming back? Nothing's changed, so what's going to be done differently? And in my face, everything has been done differently. We've had everybody who has been reordered on the same case comply eventually with the orders. And in the last week or two, we've seen more examples of defense contacting me or defendants contacting me before I'm even aware of the OCR order or have received the referral myself. They've been calling from probation departments with probation officers. I'm having POs contact me individually about people I have no idea who they're talking about. And then 24 hours later, they were right and I was wrong the whole time. So what was a complaint to Lisa has turned into what appears to be the court being very receptive to maybe some of the critical feedback we're providing, or just my personal frustrations and venting and conversations that we have with them. What do these re-referrals also matter? You can't say OCR doesn't work unless you try. And what we're trying to do is build a case for some of these cases so that maybe they're not frequent flyers in a system, and we can kind of pre-anticipate what the competency finding will be. This is where we are. This hasn't been done in the outpatient setting. This whole building a caseload of an individual, but this is what happens every single day in inpatient psych or bed days. These are high utilizers, and this is a way that we're not duplicating services down the road. So with that, I'll give the example of NetCare's outpatient behavioral health clinic. We created a clinic basically because NetCare has a public side, a civil side, that has now interdisciplinary and psychiatric behavioral health care. So they have primary care, they have counseling, they have psychiatry, medication management, nursing services, everything. So I outlined the example of a defendant we had who was nothing but cooperative and compliant. This guy had all of the factual knowledge in the world, but boy, were his delusions fixed and intense, directly correlated to the offenses in question. So we notified the court that, hey, he's being very, very, very compliant, but without medication changes, we're not going to get anywhere. Do you want us to do an early evaluation, or do we want to consider some change? Fortunately, in this case, this person met criteria to be admitted to Twin Valley. The court did not do that. They asked us if we would be willing to enroll this person in our outpatient clinic, and basically it's a way for us to know this person is taking their medications without forcing anything. The way that we did that was transition them off oral medications into long-acting injections, and now we know the day they got their shot. We know their symptoms are going to be hopefully maybe decreasing along this predetermined timeline. And now this guy actually might be competent, and he's going to be housed in OCR instead of ever stepping foot in Twin Valley. And that's a pretty good success story, especially when you can't mandate meds in the outpatient setting. that's kind of all the information I have. Do you guys have any questions for me that I can answer?
In the case you just described, did the court actually order medication over objection?
I don't know that I would say that. They ordered him to maintain compliance with treatment as determined by treatment providers, which fortunately for us, our civil program is still in-house. We're just working internally. We just don't share any of the forensic information with them, and they give us updates of what they're seeing. So essentially we didn't know if he's taking it, we didn't know, well now he's got a shot, we know this is what we're seeing. So it's been helpful to actually have the data behind, well, this guy's less delusional now, why? Not a lot of OCR programs probably have opportunities like that. And what we would like to see is maybe some way of transitioning more people into psychiatric treatment with our agency, just so we can monitor it and not have to rely on releases of information and medical records.
So our next presentation will be a presentation on dismiss and refer process with Judge David Brannon, Magistrate Brittany Doggett, and Prosecutor Amy Musto.
To my right is Amy Musto. She's been a prosecutor for 21 years. She's a little bit unique in that she's been in a couple of counties. She's coming from Montgomery, working mostly in Dayton and now newly with Columbus, which is nice. She's extremely interested in the dismiss and refer process. And she's here to provide mostly her experience and maybe best practices. To my left is Brittany Doggett. She's a magistrate with Probate Court in Montgomery County. She's been there for a couple of years. And I've been on the bench for 3 years in my first term. I am just the guy in the room. I wanted to mention real quick, the forms that Justice Stratton mentioned are civil commitment forms for probate. We love our forms. Traditionally, for decades, we've had no civil commitment forms. We had forms for estates, guardianships, adoptions, all these things, but not civil commitments. So that's what's new. Those will be forwarded to the Supreme Court, hopefully for approval. AOT is our next project. That'll be starting May 10th. Quick shout out to Judge Wiles in Wayne County. She did a lot of the work. Magistrate Doggett and Judge Park. So I just wanted to clarify that. This is a little bit of the Wild West with the dismiss and refer process. And Brittany, why don't you just mention what dismiss and refer is for everybody?
Sure. So just a little discussion on this. So really going back kind of to SB2 is when we've really been pushing for this. But basically, this is a process that allows individuals, a little higher, sorry, from the criminal court to be referred over to the probate. So they're basically individuals who are criminal, usually found incompetent and unrestorable in time, but they still need treatment. So instead of just letting them go into the streets, you can actually refer it over to the probate court, where then, as long as they meet our criteria, we can get them assistance, get them treatment, and try to get them kind of stabilized so that they can be basically returned to the community.
Yep.
I do also want to note, we use the phrase dismiss and refer, but there are a lot of different languages used right now. And I just want to kind of note, I think, Betsy, when you have it from the TAC, that they're pushing for a dismiss upon civil commitment with AOT, because an AOT is kind of an important part of the dismiss and refer process.
And I mentioned it was a little bit like the Wild West. I think there's a little bit of, you have to have trust between the courts, the prosecutors, public defenders, and everybody involved. I know some counties flat out won't try it. We're here because we're willing to try it, and it's, you know, you hear things and you don't know, so you get everybody like this in a room and find out what.
I've been asked to talk to you about the dismiss and referral process from the prosecutor perspective. And what we found is that the most important thing is communication. I think that's already been talked about by other individuals who've spoken here today, and I think we're all aware that that is the key. And then sharing of information is also very important as well. When we are looking at these cases as prosecutors, I think the first question people have is, why would they want to do this? And the thing that we have found is that when people are found incompetent, not restorable, we cannot prosecute them at that point, but they are still someone in need of services. And if we don't find a venue, a way to provide those services, we're going to see them again, and probably very soon. And so that motivates us to try and collaborate with other individuals, including the Public Defender's Office, defense attorneys, the probate court, the ACMIC board, other providers in order to try and get these folks the treatment they need. The advantage is for us, maybe we see them less, maybe we don't see them again. And so that's why we wanted to collaborate on this. So I've come from Dayton Municipal Court, and in that court we have a prosecutor review process for all of the filings that we take. And so rather than officers just filing the charges directly, every case is reviewed in the prosecutor's office. And that gives us the opportunity to review the case at the front end and look for these issues and see how we might help. As we review these cases, there's several stages at which we look at this case and have considerations. So I was going to go through those different stages. We talk about it at the intake stage, then pretrial assessment or quick set trial assessment. How do we get that competency evaluation done and the issues that we face with doing that, and then the evaluation results and what we do from there. So first I want to talk about the intake assessment process. As I mentioned, we review the cases when they come in. And we've developed a lot of tools through our collaboration with the probate court and the defense bar to help us to do this more effectively. One of the most recent developments is the ability to see on Justice Web what cases are open with the probate court, if individuals have an open probate case. This has been really invaluable, but because before that, we may have an individual we could recognize as having mental health issues, but we'd have no idea if they were in treatment or services, what those treatment services looked like, or if they'd had any contact with the probate court. So by having that information available to us, that's one piece of the puzzle that allows us to know if this is someone, we need to begin thinking about that. We also look to see if we've had past contact with these individuals. A lot of times we have the frequent flyers who come back over and over again. And we look to see what the police reports and other charging offenses that we have are going to tell us about it. What's the nature of this offense? Does the officer recognize that there may be mental health issues? Are there issues that we can spot through the actual offense? You know, someone is saying things that seem outlandish or not in touch with reality. It cues us that this could be a case we want to look at. We sometimes have recent competency reports as well, where we can look and see if we've had contact with this person and what those reports look like, that history. And all this information helps us to start moving the case in the right direction early on. So, what do we do with that information? Well, once we've evaluated the case and seen that this may be someone who we want to point that direction for, we sometimes reach out to the ACMIC board right then, or we reach out to the probate court right then. If they have an open case, they're actively in a probate case involvement, they're actively involved in their case, we may not want to take charges at all. We may want to just refer the case over to the existing probate case. The fact that this individual is usually in jail at that time gives the probate court a unique opportunity, particularly for folks who are difficult to track down due to limited housing issues. And so we try to reach out to them in order to enable them to know where this person is and to get services connected with them. If we're able to do that with someone who already has an open case, then that lets us move forward more quickly in getting folks out of the jail and into the services they need.
Yeah.
Just on Justice Web, when Amy mentioned it, it's a homegrown system out of Montgomery County where it's a lot of information is pulled from a lot of different databases, probably 200 agencies. It's expensive, it's tedious, it's a little bit old. It's just one of those systems built on systems. It works though, and they use it. Some of this comes down to just sharing information, which we all know is helpful. The more information out there, the better. I'm gonna get myself in trouble, but Montgomery County is one of 2 counties in Ohio that I know of where the probate court's docket is online. We don't show images, it's much like Hamilton County, but the feedback we get from families, from law enforcement, from the social workers, from the hospitals, is that thank you, we can actually see what's going on to see who's under commitment, but also hold people accountable. There's that accountability aspect. If somebody doesn't file something, it shows up. I look at the superintendent's rule 55C. It gives probate court judges the authority to divulge mental health records.
That's sharing of information and then collaboration. prosecutors and defense attorneys don't always get along too well, but it really is an important point of collaboration. I think sometimes the attitude from the defense bar has been, well, I just want to get my guy out of jail, I don't care after that. And I think it's short-sighted, and I think that the defense bar has begun to see that that is a short-sighted idea, that the goal really should be to get the person the treatment and services they need in order to not have them get arrested again next week for the same or similar charges. And so we've started communicating more with them at these early stages. If we have a case that we see may have competency issues, we'll highlight it for the defense bar so that when they go over to the arraignment hearing and meet with individuals for arraignment, they already have the information. This could be someone they want to look at more closely. That helps us to move this process along more quickly. Time is of the essence. Everything we do in this process takes time, and so the sooner we can get together the information, recognize what needs to happen, and move forward, the more effective that it is. So as I said, we evaluate this case at different levels. The next assessment we have is at the pretrial. At that point, they've been assigned counsel. They've usually been in jail. In Montgomery County and Dayton Municipal Court, we generally hold people in jail who have mental health issues in order to try and get them assessed, particularly if it is someone who has had several offenses of the same nature. We find if they are given an OR bond, they end up going back and doing the same thing, and then there is a difficulty with getting people back into court. I know that jail is not the ideal location for these individuals. We do not have a mental health facility that we can house them in this pretrial manner, and so this is what we are stuck with for the time being. That is something that we would hope for is an alternative to that. When they have someone in pretrial detention, though, especially on a low-level offense, the time that they have to prosecute the case goes very quickly. And so as a prosecutor, we have to assess whether or not we want to continue to hold someone in jail. If we can find family and support and other people to allow this person to be out on their own and still meet appointments to be assessed for competency issues, we try and do that if we can. If they are without resources, without a place to live, oftentimes they will remain in jail. And that's where it becomes very important that we move forward as quickly as possible. It is our hope that by the time we get to a pretrial conference, the defense counsel has had a chance to speak with their client and that they have had a chance to evaluate that competency is appropriate and file a motion for competency evaluation. If they haven't moved forward to do that, it really does cause delays in the case. Once they have filed that motion, we're looking to get that evaluation done as quickly as possible. And so the defense bar buying into this process, wanting to see people receive treatment if they cannot be prosecuted, is a really important component of this. And meeting with them, developing those relationships has been important as well. The other thing we try and do is something that was mentioned. If we can find family, friends, support individuals for this person and gather that information, it helps us to get them to the treatment they need ultimately. So we try and gather that information as we go along, coordinate, if we can, an outpatient arrangement for that individual, out of jail arrangement for that individual, in which they can still get to appointments, but they are not in the jail. So the next thing we need to do is get that competency evaluation done. And it is important, there's a lot of moving parts to getting this done. We need the judge to order the evaluation efficiently. We need to contact the agency that's going to do the evaluation and get that done in a timely fashion. What I have seen in my short time in Columbus that I like is a centralized evaluation. We have one individual who does the evaluations, and that allows everybody to know who's going to do the evaluation. It allows for a more efficient, streamlined process. In Montgomery County and Dayton Municipal, we would have multiple different people doing evaluations out of the same agency. These folks handle other cases and other aspects of mental health care. And so they can't always get to people as quickly as we would like them to. I think that that has improved, and we're getting evaluations done in a more efficient manner. But working out a process, working out individuals who can be committed to getting these evaluations done quickly and efficiently has been a very important process, part of moving this process along. Again, we have to evaluate if we're going to hold this person in jail or we're going to release them. And we have to really consider that maximum sentence issue, because if we do reach that point in which they've served their maximum sentence, we cannot refer the case to probate. And there's nothing sadder to me than seeing someone serve, weeks in jail only to not have the report in a timely fashion and not be able to get them to the services they need. Yeah, it's been a little bit varied. When we first started doing this, we were looking at 20 to 30 days to get an evaluation. Now we're getting a more efficient process going. At least when I left we were getting the evaluation done more quickly. But usually it's 2 to 3 weeks before you get an evaluation back. So time runs quickly and time is of the essence. Once we get the results of that evaluation, again, time is of the essence. We need to make sure that the court is scheduling cases as efficiently as possible. As soon as we get that report back on competency, we need to bring that individual in, especially if they are in jail, as quickly as possible. We do have considerations for Marcy's Law issues if there are victims in the case, and so we need to have time to notify victims so they can be present, be part of that hearing. But we need to move as quickly as possible because time is running. Assuming the person in this scenario, our assumption is that this person is found to be not competent and not restorable, then we need to again decide about detention issues at that point. The court is authorized to hold someone for 10 days after the finding of not competent, not restorable, in order to allow them to be processed to the probate court. It is very important that when we get those evaluation results, the court move quickly and efficiently in getting their entry on and holding that hearing so that the probate court still has time in which to do what they need to do to process this person over.
Here's one that we talk about a lot. Some defense attorneys want to use prior evaluations. So the question for you, Amy, is can I use a prior evaluation, and how much time between those prior evaluations, if the answer is yes, that you can use those?
From a legal standpoint, the prosecution can ask for a new evaluation every time the individual is arrested. That would be what the legal answer is. Practically speaking, we have tried to work out a system to allow us to extend that. If someone has been evaluated in the last 6 weeks, we generally will rely on that evaluation in order to make the process more efficient in getting the individual to the probate court and to mental health services, and also to control the expense of doing evaluation after evaluation on the same person when we already have a very good idea what the results are going to be. There's pushback from the defense bar. They would like to see us rely on evaluations that are much older than that. But our understanding and talking to mental health professionals is that with competency being something that is going to change over time, that really 6 weeks is as long as we should be looking back, and that it could change even quicker than that. So we do it with caution. It's not a hardline rule. If we believe there may be changes that are significant or another evaluation should be done, even within that 6-week period, we will ask that another one be completed. But we are trying to work with the system in order to get people where they need to be as efficiently as possible, and relying on that 6-week look-back period allows us to do that. So we get the results of evaluation. What do we do now? Well, there's a lot of considerations as to whether or not we're going to refer the case for probate. I would say 9 times out of 10 we do. We want to see people get the mental health services they need, but we have to make a determination if they are appropriate. How do we do that? Well, we look at the nature of the offense. We consider the recommendations of the competency evaluator. Most often they will give us a recommendation as to whether this individual is appropriate for mental health treatment and would benefit from mental health treatment. We also rely on the recommendation as to whether outpatient or inpatient treatment would be appropriate in evaluating whether or not to send the case on. We would also consider if we've tried to probate this individual before this, and has that been successful? Have they engaged in treatment and services? I think that we recognize that it's not always going to take the first time. We may have to refer people to probate court more than once in order to get them to engage in services. And so we're willing to give people multiple tries, but at some point you have to recognize that this is just not working. And this is not going to be an effective method and effective use of our time and resources to make the referral in those cases. For the most part, though, we are still early on in this, and we are referring cases even from people who have been referred before and not engaged in services. The only other consideration is whether or not they are really appropriate for it. If someone has an organic brain injury or something that is not something that would benefit from treatment, not that everyone would benefit from treatment, but in the legal sense, that we don't refer those cases because they don't meet the statutory requirements.
And one of the things I'm just going to talk about then is when the case is sent over to the probate court, part of our issue is trying to get the correct paperwork. So these cases actually come over with kind of a small amount of information. So we're receiving the affidavit, copy of the evaluation, and oftentimes what we are missing might be things like the Social Security number, which usually is needed by our ACMIC board to try to start getting the person set up with an outpatient provider or an inpatient provider. So we actually have a confidential form that is sent over with our paperwork that has just a little of that demographic information. The court doesn't really use it, but we can forward it then to our ACMIC board to get them kind of going on trying to find a location of placement. One big thing with probate is once the affidavit is basically sent to us, we have to have an initial hearing within 10 days. And oftentimes, we are trying to also work with how long the person has been in the jail. As Amy mentioned, the criminal court can hold them for up to 10 days. So those 10 days may not be running at the same time. We try to schedule these almost immediately. Most of these individuals are individuals who are in the jail at that time. If it is one where we have a new affidavit filed, we have to have an evaluator go out, do the evaluation, and then we can bring them for the hearing. So usually that's 2 to 3 days we have before we can bring them over. If it is an individual who's actually got an open probate court, we set those for a status hearing, and we can bring over the individual as long as we know we can get their case manager from their agency. Another thing is just we do get affidavits from both courts and the prosecutors in our county. So Dayton Community Court, we always get it from the prosecutor. However, we have outlying courts that will send us from the judge directly. And part of that is then trying to figure out if they're missing a piece, who gets contacted. So oftentimes we don't get the entry that gives us basically dismissing the case to give us jurisdiction. So we're having to either reach out to the prosecutor, we're going to reach out to their office, but if it's a judge, we're oftentimes trying to find a bailiff, trying to find someone who can get us that form. One of the other things just with that is also how the hold works at the jail, because the criminal court is sending over the hold, but the probate court is the one who is having the hearing. So it's coordinating that to make sure that they recognize when those 10 days are up, they have to go even if we've not held the hearing, and also that once we've had our hearing, that person needs to be out of jail basically immediately. So they've seen probate, if we've ordered inpatient or outpatient, they're going to inpatient or outpatient that day. Another just thing that part of this, I think, overall system is just communication, but we do communication on multiple levels. And when we're dealing with the individual trying to get over to probate and also trying to get them out, we're oftentimes working with family members. So if we order somebody to outpatient, a family member is usually going to be who picks them up from the jail. And also, do they have an appointment, a sheet of paper that's going with them, telling them when they're supposed to go to their outpatient provider.
I think just to give you an example of the communication issue, it's taken about 1.5 years to get the stakeholders in Montgomery County involved, and that would include law enforcement, hospitals, treatment providers, justice partners, all the courts, prosecutors, defense attorneys, commissioners, umpteen others. And once you do that, I mean, we meet bi-monthly, I kind of run that meeting, but there's several other task forces that have been combined into it. So once you get all those people in the room, you start seeing actual results. And at our end, we're getting ready to flip some switches, which we're excited about, e-file, things like that. But you can't coordinate these people without everybody going through that painful process, flow charts and checklists, and we're only a portion of the way through. Oh, you? Sorry.
That's good. And so one of the things I do want to talk about is just from our point of view, these cases actually aren't really that different from the cases we would receive from an emergency hospitalization or from somebody filing in the community. The way we handle the case is the same, same sort of criteria, all of that. The real difference is in how we do the coordination on these cases. So as I mentioned, sorry, I'm terrible with the microphone, but a lot of it is coordination with the jail. So when we receive an affidavit, and it's a good affidavit, we do have some issues. Sometimes we get some that are moderate intellectual disabilities. That's not one that works with mental health, and oftentimes it's a complete different situation that we can handle in any way. But for those that are good, we almost immediately reach out to the jail upon receipt and just let them know, hey, this is an individual with a probate. Have you gotten the order from criminal court? We're going to probably be setting them for a hearing within the next couple of days. So they're aware. As soon as we actually have that hearing date set, we also send that over to them. This person is going to be or need to be brought to the courthouse. We are very lucky. Our jail is right across from our courthouse, so the sheriff's department does bring over the individuals. So we don't have that transport issue that some other courts may have. And we also are pretty lucky on the fact that if we have to do a quick hearing, so it's one where it's an individual needs a status hearing, they're already under probate, and we're on a time crunch, they'll usually work with us and have them there the next day. We also do a little bit different with our evaluator process for the individuals. As Evie mentioned, we have a hard time with a lot of these individuals finding them. They tend to be transient. Oftentimes they're in the shelter, but we don't know when they might be at the shelter. So we do usually have them stay in the jail so that we can get the evaluation done. As I said, we turn them around pretty quickly, just so they're not being held. But we have one evaluator who actually does our jail evaluations. So she goes out, does the evaluation, and she'll be ready for our hearings. We don't really have multiple people going in and doing the jail evaluations. And so because of that, we actually have a set form we immediately send over to the jail with that individual's name on it so that they can just know she's coming over to do the evaluation and they can release their medical records to her. And then we do a lot of coordinating with the ACMIC board on placement on these individuals because if we have them in emergency hospitalization, they're already in the hospital. But we are actively, from kind of the time the case comes in, looking for a bed for that individual. If possible, we actually would like to move them from the jail to the bed before the hearing. A lot of times it just doesn't happen. The other issue is some of these individuals we have coming through have actually been trespassed from our local hospitals. So it's trying to figure out if there's another hospital in the region we can get them to, or if that's not going to work, then it's do we go immediately to outpatient. We did have an individual who he was actually through our system a couple of times. He had gotten trespassed from all the hospitals, even though the recommendation was inpatient. So we had to place him outpatient, but it was the time it clicked for him. So he is actually doing really well right now. He's going to his treatment. And it was just the fact that we still kind of worked that system. When he left the jail, he left with a parent who had his time set. Here's where he has to go. He had one. I think we had everybody who could possibly know and within the HIPAA requirements that he had that appointment and he made it. And as I said, he's doing really well right now. So it's just trying to figure out what's going to work for the individual in that coordination. We have one concern is we have to do a lot of it by email change. So you have a lot of trying to communicate where you can't actually say the person's name, but most of us know who it is, things like that. We also actually do a lot of coordination with the public defenders because even when the case is dismissed, they're just concerned, are we going to see this individual coming back? So they're trying to make sure they've actually been placed with the provider and are receiving the treatment, so they're not going to end up picking up another charge.
From mine, it's a trust issue. media courts, particularly, why should we turn them over to probate court if you guys aren't going to do anything? Traditionally, in our court, after 90 days, the commitments would expire, and that's it. Then we're back in the pink slip process or the dismissal refer process again. I think from the probate court's end, we just need to watch our dockets and show we're trying to do something, whether that be AOT or some other ticklers in our system. Like we give notifications to the out of board that an expiration is going to happen. Just anything to show that we're trying to keep these people on our dockets.
Best practices is kind of where we want to go from here. One person, one evaluator is important. A small group of individuals who become your experts on how to do this also helps as you're trying to communicate and coordinate between the jail, the Adams Board, the prosecutor's office, the public defender's office, and all the other players that have to be involved in this. Having a centralized person that you can go to in order to coordinate those efforts is really important, and having everyone understand how the work is going to flow and what the logistical issues are is very important as well. Yeah, so we talked a little bit about who needs to be at the table and how important that is, and that we have probate court, criminal court, prosecutors all meeting together, and it really is key to having that work out. And then sharing data amongst those individuals is also extremely important, making sure that we are all on board, all understanding what this individual situation is. If they do have an open probate case, making sure that we're not kicking that case by initiating a new probate case, which can cause problems in continuation of care.
And then the last thing that I think I just want to mention is also the discharge notice is really the communication back to the court and the prosecutor on what has happened. And so that's when we've actually had a little bit of difficulty trying to get from our entities we commit to. And it leaves a sort of gap where the court doesn't know if that person ever got treatment, anything like that. We try to communicate back as the probate court. But that's one of those where it's really a work in progress for us in making sure that everyone is moved back into it. So that's one of those ongoing issues that we're working towards. But we also have the issue where sometimes even the probate court isn't always informed when someone leaves our local hospitals and is actually now put on outpatient. So those issues that occur, in the full process also can cause problems here within this. And I think as Judge mentioned, we've been working on really getting our AOT program up and running because these are a lot of individuals who need the kind of wraparound services that AOT can really provide.
Dr. Gordas, I don't know how we are on time, but I think we've covered what we wanted to cover, and thank you for listening. You're welcome to contact any of the above. If you've got questions or if we can share anything, thank you.
Well, hello, everybody. While we're getting our panel mic'd up, I'll just explain a little bit about the Psychiatry and Treatment AG Subcommittee and why we even came about to the topic of assisted outpatient treatment. So I'm Dr. Stankowski, Joy Stankowski. I chair the committee with Adam Sorensen. And he and I were talking a little bit about what would the Psychiatry and Treatment Subcommittee focus on. And by the way, if any of you are interested in these subcommittees, membership is very fluid. We would love to have you in our committee, and I'm sure other committees of the AG Task Force would feel the same. The more the merrier. So he and I were talking about treatment and talking about, especially after COVID, there's not a lot of mental health treatment in the community. So how do people end up getting treatment? A lot of times they get arrested and that's how they're getting treated. Is that the best thing? No, it's not, for all kinds of reasons. So then Betsy Johnson had talked to us before about assisted outpatient treatment. She's a great advocate for that. And our task force started talking about it, but realized there are barriers. Ohio's a big state with a lot of different counties, and easier said than done. But we thought it was such a worthwhile thing to implement or talk about, especially as a diversion from the criminal justice system, that our combined task forces put together this panel. And the point of this panel is Betsy Johnson in the middle will give an introduction of what is assisted outpatient treatment. And then Dr. Doug Smith, who is the CCO of the Summit County Adams Board. Summit County is one of the first counties to really do assisted outpatient treatment in Ohio, and he's got a lot of good experience to share. And Sarah Hyatt from Hamilton County. Hamilton County is pretty unique in that they've got a way to try to look at medications in the community, even when people aren't that interested in being compliant. So I think all three of these members have a great deal to say about AOT, and I'm going to hand it off to Betsy Johnson.
Good afternoon. Good to see you all. My name's Betsy Johnson. I'm with the Treatment Advocacy Center. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay. If you're not familiar, we're a national nonprofit based out of DC. We're actually, if you're familiar with NAMI, we're actually have some of the same founding fathers. Our organization's been around for 25 plus years. But we're similar to NAMI in that we advocate for policy change, and but the group that we focus on is people with serious mental illness, primarily schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, and even more narrowly, people who lack insight into their illness, with a condition called anosognosia, which basically they don't believe that they're ill, so they don't follow through with treatment. And it's not that they're in denial; they truly don't believe that they're ill. That's that's who we focus on. And we believe that assisted outpatient treatment really is the most appropriate treatment for this specific population who are caught in that revolving door of hospitalization and incarceration. So I just wanted to, I know we're talking a lot about AOT, and I just wanted to make sure we're all on the same page in terms of what we mean when we're talking about AOT. So I'm just going to a quick refresher. I know many of you are already familiar with it, but just to be clear so you all understand, AOT is involuntary. It's not like a mental health court in the criminal justice system where somebody volunteers to go into mental health court as an alternative to the traditional court route. So it is an involuntary program. That's not to say that people don't go into it voluntarily. If that's the case, that's always wonderful if you can arrange it that way, but it's not necessarily the case. It's a civil court order. It's in civil court, not criminal court. It's there's full due process. It's a full trial hearing. You get the you get all the same protections as you would get in the criminal justice system. It's the least restrictive setting, we believe. It's less restrictive than hospitalization, less restrictive than jail or prison, and even guardianship in some instances. It allows for a quicker return to the community. So if you're in the hospital and you're in jail and you're being considered as a candidate for AOT, it's a way to get out of those and more intensive care settings quicker. If the system knows that you're going into another setting where you're going to be monitored. You get the needed treatment whatever that treatment is, there's a treatment plan developed and you're going to get what you need in the system. There's not additional treatment. It's really just a traditional treatment that's available to anybody else with these conditions living in the community. And the big difference is you're being monitored for adherence. We think every program ought to have a monitor who's responsible for making sure that that person is following through with treatment, and there's that ability then to intervene quickly. They don't have to become a danger to themselves or others for the system to be able to intervene because there's a court order. So as soon as they start to decompensate, the treatment team and the court can work together to get them, to intervene and get them back on track. There's this black robe effect, and it varies from county to county, but that black robe effect really helps get the person's attention initially as soon as they're under that AOT order, and then eventually with the treatment team working to get them engaged in treatment. The more they become engaged in treatment, the less they need to rely on that court order and that black robe effect. But in some communities, that black robe effect, the courts meet with these individuals maybe every 2 weeks, once a month, while they're getting adjusted to their treatment and they're becoming more engaged. Other communities, they use the court only when the person is starting to decompensate, kind of get them back in front of the judge, and the judge can remind them that they're under this court order, and what can we do to help to get you back on track, sort of thing. So it looks a little different from county to county. There's one last one. And then the other really important thing to remember is not only is that individual under a court order to follow their treatment plan, it's also the treatment system that's sort of under the court order to make sure that they're providing the treatment that this person needs. So if you're returning to court on a regular basis, it's not just the individual that's returning to court, but they're usually coming with their case manager or some other treatment team member. And if that person is not following through with treatment, if they're missing appointments, and the court finds out, well, it's because they didn't have transportation or something else, it's not that individual's fault that they didn't go to the appointment. It's really the treatment system. So the system knows, the treatment providers know that the court is monitoring and following these cases. So they're going to be more inclined to go that extra mile to make sure that this person gets the help that they need. These are very difficult people to serve. They don't show up for their appointments on time, if they show up at all. So you really got to go out and find them and get them where they need to be. So next. Thank you. So one of the things you often hear, well, AOT doesn't have teeth. Because it's not in the criminal justice system, you're not going to go to jail because you don't follow through with treatment. The whole goal is to keep these folks out of jail, so why on earth would we want them to go to jail if they don't adhere? But there are consequences. One of those consequences could be more frequent check-ins with the court. As I mentioned, some people may go every 2 weeks for a while, then do better, go every 4 weeks, go every 8 weeks, and then they'll go, if they're starting to slip, then they get back in court and say, hey, we're worried about you. We want to start seeing you every 2 weeks again for a while till things get back on track. The time the time that they're in AOT can be extended under Ohio law. You can be in it up to 2 years with the option to continue it. So that can be continued over and over again as needed. If they start to decline to the point where it's really impacting their ability to function in the community, they can be picked up, brought in for an evaluation, and then if need be, they can go to the hospital. Otherwise, if they're evaluated and found not to meet hospital level of care, they can go back to the community, but then get back right in front of the judge again, so the judge can remind them, listen, you almost went to the hospital. What are we got to work together to make sure that doesn't happen again. So there are consequences. Real quickly, I brought some information with me. I have it over there. I've got some really rich data, mostly out of the state of New York. Well, we've got it from all over, but the New York data is really good because they've had Kendra's law in effect for over 20 years, and they have under their state, it's mandated in New York, so their programs have to report out to their legislature every 5 years. So we've got lots of great data out of them. But there's a sheet in the back that kind of goes through all the research if you're interested, and on the back side are all the citations, so if you don't believe me, you can check it. Next one. Okay, so real quickly, there's 3 paths to AOT. The first one, most common, is coming out of an involuntary hospitalization. That's the easiest because you've got the person's been stabilized, you've got all the medical documentation to demonstrate that they meet criteria, and then they go right from the hospital into the community with a treatment plan in place and a treatment team. The second one is directly from the community. Under Ohio law, anybody can file a petition for AOT in civil court, family members, anybody. It's difficult to do. I'll tell you, because this is somebody who's not in treatment, so you don't have the medical documentation to make the case to court that they meet clear and convincing evidence. So as much as we wish it got used more, it's understandable why we don't. And then the last one is the one we're here to talk about today, is a diversion from jail, and more specifically an alternative to competency restoration. And I appreciate Magistrate Doggett earlier talking about what we call this thing, and dismiss, a lot of people call it dismiss and refer or dismiss and transfer. And we really think, it's got to be called dismiss upon civil commitment with AOT. It's not enough just to transfer a case to civil court if you don't have an AOT program to put that individual into. If you're just putting them in the hospital for a bit while they get stabilized and then releasing them back to community with an appointment card to follow through with treatment, that's not going to work for the population that we're talking about. So some of the benefits, clearly it opens, we all are here because we're worried about the access to state hospital beds. So using this model, you're going to be opening some of those beds for others, more acute patients. It improves outcomes. We just kind of went over all those reductions and arrest reductions and hospitalizations, reductions in homelessness, victimization, all that. And then it saves money. Of course, they're not in expensive care for as long. But also, and I don't know that Ohio is really under threat to this, but there are some states that have gotten sued by the Department of Justice for keeping people in jail for way too long pending competency restoration. I think the state of Washington just paid a $100 million fine for that very thing. So next. So just real quickly, who are we talking about? We're talking about people who meet criteria for civil commitment. The danger to themselves, danger to others, gravely ill. They're not a risk to public safety. They're not a candidate for mental health court. Mental health court, if that's available, then absolutely go that route. They do have more teeth. They're unlikely to be restored to competency. They have a history of lack of adherence due to this lack of insight. And they can understand what the court is ordering them to do. So that's what we're talking about. Folks basically caught in that revolving door. I thought it was funny with Michael's presentation earlier where he was talking about people who aren't suitable for outpatient civil for the competency restoration. So these are the folks that were in that list that he had, that these are folks who aren't good candidates. This is who this is for. So that was perfect because they line up perfectly with our list here. So quickly, how does this work? We've kind of just heard it, so I don't want to belabor it. So they meet all that criteria we just talked about. Hopefully, they're going to be hospitalized. If they meet that criteria, chances are they need to be hospitalized at least for a little while just to get stable, but not always. And I know that's not an option in all counties in Ohio. But hopefully, they're going to the hospital not for long stays to be restored to competency, but just short stays to be stable. So when they come out and that decision then is made by the prosecutor, hopefully if they meet all these conditions, then they'll be willing to dismiss, and then the petition is filed, hopefully by the prosecutor, but if not, it could be the hospital, it could be the mental health system. It doesn't really matter as long as it gets filed. And then once it's clear that this individual is appropriate for AOT, then the prosecutor would dismiss the charge. And then next. So the person then, next step is they would engage in treatment. And we're not saying they adhere to treatment. I just want you to hear me because there's a difference between adhering to treatment and engaging in treatment. Because they could be following their treatment plan, but telling their psychiatrist, at their monthly appointment, listen, doc, the only reason I'm taking my medication is because I've got this court order. Well, if that's the case, then they're not engaging in treatment. They may be adhering. So you got to continue that until they start to make that connection in their head. By following this treatment plan, my life is improving. They might not have this epiphany that, oh my goodness, I've got a mental illness, I better take my medication. But they can make that connection with the help of the judge, with the help of the treatment team, that by doing this, my life is improving, my relationships are improving, my living situation, my job situation, all those things. They have to make that connection, or you've got to need to keep continuing that order. And the beauty of it for this population is you're monitoring them constantly in the community. So, if we just dismiss those cases and are going back to the community without any monitoring, they're just going to wind up back in front of the court. But with AOT, you know that they're doing well, you know when they've engaged, and then that's when you dismiss the order and they go into the community, you have a celebration. And if they don't, then that's when you notify the prosecutor, and then it's up to the prosecutor to decide if they want to refile those charges and go a different route. So real quickly, where do we have AOT in Ohio? So all the counties you can see here that are in gold have, how you define AOT program varies because, as I mentioned, they don't look the same from county to county. But I can tell you in all these counties in gold, the civil court judge and the mental health, the ADAM board reps are in agreement that this is something that they both support, and they've identified in their community to serve as the AOT monitor. So the AOT monitor is that glue that holds this whole thing together. You saw it in the Montgomery County image where they had sort of that one thing in the middle with everyone touching them. The AOT monitor is the one that's ensuring that everybody is being communicated with at the appropriate time, the paperwork is being filed, that hearings are being held, that if somebody's not adhering to treatment, they're starting to decompensate, that the court is being notified, that everybody knows exactly what's going on from day to day with this particular individual. So these counties have all identified somebody in their system to serve in that capacity. So two things we have, and I brought one of them with me today, is a handbook. Yeah, back in the corner, thank you, being held up over there. Please grab one of those on your way out. It's our handbook talking about how this process works and why it's a good idea. And then if you live in a community that doesn't have an AOT program, or your AOT program isn't what you think it ought to be, we have a white paper that really walks you through step by step how to implement a quality AOT program. And I'm available if you need any assistance to help.
Thank you. So, we've looked at this in Summit County long before I was there. This goes back 3 decades almost, actually, now in Summit County, doing what used to be called outpatient commitment, evolved into assisted outpatient treatment. That became the national term as well through the Treatment Advocacy Center and so forth. So we've looked at this a lot as part of the T in team. We use that a lot because we do a lot of CIT as well, which is Crisis Intervention Team. And we look at this from the criminal justice CCO point of view, the sequential intercept mapping. Really, it's intercept 0, intercept 1. Right? So you have really good treatment, and the probate falls somewhere there a little before you touch a police officer. But the police officers get a lot of training, as well as our paramedics at this point in Summit County, and of course all 88 counties also have CIT, a whole other talk. And they know then that there's when in doubt, use a pink slip. And the pink slip is the first step to getting us into a hospital, into civil commitment, and then that group goes into outpatient commitment or AOT. So one of the unique pieces, I think, that's fairly unique in Summit County, but Betsy would know better, is that from the outset, we have decided, and we continue this today, that if somebody is so ill that they meet the criteria and they go all the way through that lengthy process to achieve civil commitments, that when they leave the hospital, they're automatically on AOT. We don't select and say, let's screen some out. We don't make that decision then. And the reason is that the law says the initial commitment is up to 90 days. And using easy math, I'll pretend they're in the hospital 10 days after that, probably a fair average. They've already been in the hospital for a number of days to get to that hearing. So when they leave the hospital, that means they have about up to 80 days to be on assisted outpatient treatment. We take that very seriously, including the up to. So we have it all set up, I'll describe the process, so that they can end it tomorrow if the outpatient team interacts with Mr. Jones, I'll just say Mr. Jones, could be Ms. Johnson or whoever he, she, or they are, and decides they don't currently need it, or there's other reasons, then they will just end it. They'll reach out to Judge Stormer. She's our excellent Supreme Court, yeah, right, probate judge, and had been on the criminal bench previously. So she really came in with an experience that I'm not sure a lot of judges get to do both of those. And she's evolved, and when she does new day court, which I'll describe, it's really from her prior work in mental health court. She started the first mental health court in Ohio as well. So she's very, very experienced in what she's doing. Really is worth a visit if you're not doing it in your county. She's very happy, I'll just say that now so don't forget, very happy to have any of you visit and actually sit next to her on the bench during court and experience it. She's had people come from other counties, other states, and I think even 2 people now from other countries come and sit next to her in her court, which she named it New Day Court. Originally she threw out Recovery Court. Turned out a lot of people call their various courts recovery courts, so she went with New Day Court. So I'll continue from the beginning. So we have a lot of a good treatment continuum in Summit County, always working to enhance that. We've worked with the Criminal Justice CCOE. I see Jeff Fudo here from there, and maybe some others are part of that. And we've done the sequential intercept mapping 3 different times, actually, 2 for the criminal justice side, 1 for the opiate side, and actually 4. We just recently did one for the child adolescent system, including the courts in that system. And that helps us look at, well, what else can we plug in to the gaps? And although this doesn't work for youth yet, that could happen eventually, perhaps. So between CIT And I should say we now have a new Summit County outreach team. It's a mobile crisis team with a police officer, CIT-trained police officer, CIT-trained paramedic, and a clinician who actually also had go through CIT, so they learned the team approach. And they go out now every day, weekdays, on first shift for now until we expand it, 8 weeks so far, going way better than we would have expected, I think. And they also have transported, out of 129 encounters as of last Friday, that was the end of the first 8 weeks, they've transported 29 times. It's a standard vehicle, extended cab Ford Expedition. Basically, they sit next in a regular seat. They're not strapped down. It's not an ambulance. It's not a cruiser. It's a different kind of vehicle. And the team makes the judgment based on safety, of course, their own and the person's. So just as another example, they've had to pink slip a number of them, of course, and then that may trigger them into this same process. So if you've got, we had in the beginning, which is why I mentioned this, we had reticence in the beginning, my beginning at least 12 years ago at ADM board with some chiefs of police, and so we're not thinking police should pink slip. And we've really spent a lot of energy disabusing them of that thought that when in doubt you should pink slip. You're not going to get sued for doing a pink slip. It's a low bar threshold and so forth. And that has worked very well. So that has helped us in the background as we've worked to enhance our AOT program. So number one, everybody who ends up civilly committed ends up on AOT. We have tried the so-called fifth criterion that's in the law now, which Betsy alluded to, the outpatient to outpatient commitment or outpatient to AOT. And really what's happened there, because NAMI, and I am on the NAMI Ohio board, so I guess you can sort of see that I got my penny, because that's my next meeting after this for the next 2 days is the annual meeting. And so NAMI's been very supportive of this as well. What's happened the few times we've tried this, where families have come in and said, hey, we really think our loved one, my brother, sister, father, whatever, needs this. By the time the family has reached the point where the illness is so exacerbated and come to us, because they get used to the behaviors a lot, we've had to actually civilly put them in the hospital against their will on a pink slip. So that's the other reason it doesn't work, is that families, not surprisingly, have a high tolerance for their loved ones. We all tend to, right? Maybe Thanksgiving meals run a little long sometimes, but we mostly do well with that. And so the net result is these people have been pink slipped. So we've not been able to test outpatient to AOT in Summit County because each time we've done it, it's ended in somebody ending up in the hospital. Just to be aware of that. So I think that's why there's a movement right now to add a lower level criterion to the pink slip. Another lecture, we're both involved in this as well, as is Judge Stormer. So the individuals end up in the hospital. They come out from civil commitment to AOT. There is a group of people that probably weren't appropriate. And so what we've discovered is once the Sudafed got put behind the counter at the pharmacy, you know this story, the street chemist came up with another way to make methamphetamine, which is a lot more toxic. And so what you see is a lot more psychosis than we used to see with your grandfather's meth, or whatever they want to call it. And so the net result is we have more illness because we thought we fixed it, and somebody mentioned whack-a-mole. You know, it's like whack-a-mole, right? We fixed one place, but we actually created, in effect, a more toxic type of meth that's on the street, and we're seeing that in Summit County. That's actually our second leading cause of overdose deaths behind fentanyl. And I think statewide there's a lot of that. So very, very toxic. As a result, those individuals may make it through a number of days in the hospital and even go to hearing. They're still ill. They meet criteria. The magistrate, usually in Summit County it's a magistrate, decision's made the person's going to be on civil commitment. But by the time they leave the hospital, they look great because then that meth psychosis cleared. So there is a group, there's others in this group, but there's a group that really don't benefit from AOT, and we will end that as quickly as possible. So I don't want to make it sound like everybody should be on it and so forth. It's a small group. When I joined the ADM board 12 years ago, we had 33 people on OPC, now AOT. And we looked back to try to figure out, because I had heard there were more when I was at North Coast, where Dr. Sinkowski and I were both at previously, and it was unclear what happened. So as we worked with the courts, we worked with the agency, and I'll describe that in a minute. All this communication piece is huge. The net result was we grew it, and then we added the New Day Court, which I'll also describe in a minute, back in January of 2016. So we took about a year of planning a big group. We have a quarterly meeting of our probate court, run by myself, some other people at ADM board, social workers in the hospital systems, sometimes law enforcement. Our attorney who represents our ADM board is there, and so on and so forth. Some of the public defenders are there to really look at every single quarter, what's going on, what's working, what's not working. We cover everything from guardianship to AOT, so it's not just about AOT when we do that meeting. And anyway, just to give you a sense of some of how do we communicate, that's part of that communication. The other piece of communication is constant, used to be paperwork, back and forth, in fact, it was so much detail. We have so we went from 33, let me finish that piece, to about 180 people now on AOT on a given day. So which I think is probably close to the right number if you look at it clinically. Some people are worried it's too many, but honestly, if you do the math, 180 out of about 50,000 citizens that our ADM system touches every year, or the 542,000 citizens in the county, it's a surgical strike. It's 0.00 something percent, right? 0.0012% or something really small. So it is a surgical strike. So but 180 is a tough task for a judge and some magistrates and mostly one agency, I'll describe that, and one ADM board. It's a lot of moving parts. And so we had spreadsheets that would get updated every single week, in effect daily, but the court was communicating with one of our administrative assistants who was communicating with me, we were communicating with the judge, we were communicating with Barry Ward, who's the attorney who's been representing ADM board, I think even before I moved to Ohio in 1998, so he's very experienced. He's excellent at what he does. And so we're doing this, we finally now, we can share this at a different time for time's sake, but we have a program now called CaseWorks that we purchased from a company called 5 Point Solutions. Then they were bought by a Canadian company called Versaterm, so it's now Versaterm, and that is phenomenal. Now we can communicate in real time, and the point of this is we don't want to violate anybody's rights, or we want to know when the initial date was, when is the renewal date or the discontinuation date if we haven't already discontinued it for clinical reasons, et cetera. So we have to track a lot. And that's part of our communications. I had really good communication from the judge and your team and others, and that is obviously the key. This doesn't work in any of these new scenarios, or if they're new to you or the ones you're already doing, without that communication. And so that's really been a huge boon, and that's recent. We've really only gotten that. Sure.
Okay.
Yep.
So it came up in the chat since we're talking about communication.
Okay.
Their clerk's office submits to the BCI the findings of mental illness. Can law enforcement see this information in BCI/leads if they pull someone over?
So my understanding is that civil commitment can end up in whatever the database is that deals with whether you can buy a gun, but I don't believe it shows up in a police database, and maybe Jeff Fudo or somebody knows the answer to that. There is, just to finish it though, there is supposed to be, and I say supposed to because I've not heard that it's worked well, there's supposed to be a Rule 95 from Trooper Hopper Act for somebody who's been found, I think it's not guilty by reason of insanity, so very, in effect, legally insane, which is obviously a technical term. That's supposed to be in the database, so if they go to serve a warrant, sadly, as we just heard with the marshals and officers recently in a different state, they know that up front. So in that case, Trooper Hopper, she didn't know information about the gentleman she went to see. Well, gentleman's probably a bad word. This case, and he shot and killed her. And she didn't know to be wary of this some years ago. So I believe that put into effect this Rule 95, which is supposed to end up in your database for police. I say, again, I've heard times where it hasn't. Please. Hey. I don't know if you want this too.
I think you're absolutely right that, the NGRI folks, we have the Rule 95 for, they do get in the BCI database, can't purchase the weapons, but they also get put into leads. What happens when an officer pulls somebody over or interacts with somebody and they put in their information, it pulls up a statement that tells them that this is a person who is not guilty by reason of insanity and under court commitment, and it provides an email address that email address goes to me. So when that email pops up, there's usually just a statement from an officer saying, hey, I pulled over this person, this is the nature of our contact. I will look at that individual's current commitment status and notify the forensic monitor that works with that individual to close that loop and make sure that they're notified. However, for the probate court, for the folks going to AOT, there's not a parallel system right now that I'm aware of. They do get into BIC or BCI for the firearms notification, but it does not go into leads at this point.
I was just going to make sure you clarified that was only for
Yes.
QTR.
Is this a good break point?
Thank you. Sure. I'm going to say one last quick thing, which is that I want to mention the Black Robe effect just from a psychological point of view, because I think it's a point people don't always think about. Most individuals who develop mental illness develop it teenager or later in terms of severe or serious and persistent mental illness, which means that long before that they've already learned who the authority figures are in the world, right? My 4-year-old grandson went 2 years as a firefighter, right? People in uniform, police officers, firefighters, nowadays, of course, Harry Potter is probably more than they think of a judge, but they learn that early. So the point is that the Black Robe effect is much more powerful than I think we give it credit for, because now they develop mental illness, and it's got to be pretty serious to get to a point where they're in AOT court to get civilly committed, so they haven't lost that. So that Black Robe effect is more powerful because that human being already had this experience before they got to that point in life. So I like to say that because I don't know that's so obvious, but I really believe that's part of the power. It's hard to measure, but I think that's part of the power of that. And the last thing I'll say is, so the bottom line is for communication, when somebody leaves the hospital in Summit County, they get a sheet of paper, they get discussed by their social worker, which is why they're in our quarterly meetings, and it gives them the date of their first clinical appointment. It also gives them the date of their first new day court appointment, which is within 2 weeks. We only hold it every other week, so it's going to be within 2 weeks, not within a week usually. And then that case manager, so that everybody in Summit County is assigned to one agency, even though we have many. We've allowed, I should say, other agencies to do it, and after about a year, they all cry uncle. Because a lot of case manager time, they've got to take them in. The only exception, which is about 1 out of 180 cases for us, is Child Guidance Family Solutions, who runs our first episode psychosis team, also the first of those teams in the state as well when it started. So just to finish that thought about why does it work, part of it's because we have one agency designated to see all of those individuals, all 180 individuals. So.
Do you do that with your standalone private psychiatric hospitals, which seem to be absorbing the non-forensic cases? Does that discharge connect?
Excellent question. Yes. So you are correct. So because for years we rarely get anybody into North Coast. Again, not their fault. It's a system's fault. But I think literally we have like one person at North Coast right now on civil. Historically, it was a lot more than that. So what we've done, though, is yes, we have hired, ADM pays for them. We have 2 hospital care navigators, one assigned to Akron General, Cleveland Clinic Akron General, one assigned to SUMA. And we pay for the whole thing. One comes from CSS, that's the agency that does AOT. One comes from Portage Path, that's an even larger agency that treats everybody up to the point of needing long-acting injectable antipsychotics. So ill, but not quite as ill. They also, however, have responsibilities. They live in the hospitals on our behalf. They work with the discharge teams to connect everybody who comes out so we don't lose anybody in the cracks here, whether they were civilly committed or not civilly committed, that we want them tracked. They also interface with Generations, which is our next highest utilized hospital, private hospital. But anywhere in the state that a Summit County patient lands, we know about it. We work with them through our hospital care navigators. We want to make sure they come back to our probate court, to our program. So great question.
I get worried about those freestanding hospitals like Generations because they're not really tied into the system and they don't really ding the case manager and the outpatient provider automatically when they're going to take the discharge. So I don't know if you have any counties, Betsy, that you see those freestanding hospitals integrated into this AOT system. You know, here in Franklin, I think it's really Twin Valley that makes the referrals. It's not so much, you know, Dublin Springs, Sun Behavioral Health, and Ohio Hospital for Psychiatry, and that's where most of our folks are going. I mean, like, by and large, it's like, that's the civil cases right there.
No, you're absolutely right, Dustin. Yeah, I know Franklin County is slowly adding hospitals to that referral process.
Okay.
But it's a slower process than some of us would like. But it is, I think, and other communities that the private hospitals that are feeding right into, like Richland County. Ohio Health feeds right into their AOT program. They identify candidates at the hospital. They got a great relationship with them. They're sitting at the table. You know, they're one of these, you know, folks around the picture we saw earlier from Montgomery County. They're at the table identifying candidates. So it varies from county to county.
That are sort of leading the charge to make those collaborations happen.
Start. Okay, I'm Sarah Hyatt, and I am the Central Connection Probate Services Director. And in answering to your question, in Hamilton County, the private psych hospitals do participate, and my office actually reaches out to train them and give them the paperwork and let them know how to handle and go through the process. So the Central Connection Probate Services is responsible for the oversight of the Hamilton County Outpatient Community Probate Program. And outpatient community probate is the outdated term for AOT, or assisted outpatient treatment. Our program in Hamilton County is over 30 years old. We currently have 251 respondents in our program. And those on community probate are the severely mentally ill. I know Betsy touched on this, but I think it's important to understand that these are the folks that have the most serious psychiatric disorders, typically schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, bipolar disorder, often major depressive disorder with psychotic features. And again, I know she mentioned this, but it is hugely important to understand what I'm going to talk about today is that a characteristic of those with severe mental illness is they lack insight into their mental illness. The name of it is anosognosia. It is a medical term. It's a neurological condition, and it makes them unaware of the fact that they have a mental illness. It's not a choice, and that's, again, it is probably one of the most important concepts you can grasp onto as I talk about the program, because it's the huge challenge of treating these folks out in the community. They just will not adhere to their treatment plans. So today I came here to talk about one of the strategies that we use in Hamilton County to address noncompliance in the community, which has been proven, and we call it the court-supported injection program. And just a little bit of history about our program. In 2017, we started seeing an increase in psychiatric hospitalizations, an increase in arrests, and we were seeing violence among those on community probate. And at the same time, we were facing a reduction in the amount of acute care psychiatric beds in our community, and we had lost access totally to our state hospital, Summit Behavioral, for civil commitments. So since failure to take medication was the most significant issue regarding these increase in hospitalizations and arrests, we developed a program to enhance medication compliance. And that is a subset of those on community probate who are on a long-acting injectable, which is effectively treating their illness. That group is required to have their injection administered in the community as a part of their court-ordered treatment plan. Now, this was a collaboration among the Hamilton County Probate Court, the Hamilton County Mental Health and Recovery Services Board, the Hamilton County Sheriff's Office, the University of Cincinnati Medical Center Psychiatric Emergency Services, our outpatient providers, and we also had representation from the probate defense attorneys. It was interesting when we started looking into it, doing the research across the country to find a model. We couldn't find one. So this was not an overnight development. It took us over a year meeting in groups, really looking closely at all the issues relevant to a program like this. and we did develop a very, very detailed procedure for it. At this point, we have been operating our program for a little over 7 years. We initially projected we would have 12 to 20 on the program. It is very much supported by our outpatient and inpatient providers, and we have now 118 on the program. So over the years, we have done studies, 3 different studies with different groups on the program who have been in the program for at least a year, looking back at their arrests and hospitalizations prior to being on the program compared to their experience in the program. And we now can confirm that our injection program is working to reduce hospitalizations and to reduce arrests. And I wanted to share those outcomes with you today. Our first group studied, we saw a 33% reduction in psychiatric hospitalizations and a 21% reduction in arrests. The second group we studied showed a 59% reduction in psychiatric hospitalizations and a 16% reduction in arrests. And that information was actually published at the annual meeting of the American Academy of Psychiatry and the Law last October in Chicago, and that's where Dr. Stankowski became aware of our program. And then our third group study showed an 86% reduction in psychiatric hospitalizations and an 83% reduction in arrests. So the Hamilton County Sheriff's Office Probate Division deputies are instrumental in implementing this program. They all receive crisis intervention training and other training regarding how to best deal with the mentally ill. They are very professional, but I would like to point out they're very compassionate with this population. They forge relationships. And I think that's really important to note because typically in mental health, our objective is to reduce the number of interactions between law enforcement and the mentally ill, but in this case, that interaction is integral to this population getting the treatment they need. Yes?
Are they in uniform when they interact with these individuals?
They are in uniform, yes. So one of the early lessons that we learned regarding due process that caused us to modify our procedure, our original procedure required each respondent to come into court so that they could be given notice that they were placed in the program and have an opportunity with the magistrate to discuss it. And we did have subpoenas issued for everyone. And what we learned very quickly is no one showed up for their court hearing. So we have modified the procedure to require that each respondent in the program receives oral and written notice. It's a standard statement in their treatment plan, and they sign for it, and that treatment plan is integrated into the court order, submitted to the court, and reviewed every time they have a full hearing. Additionally, they're all told that they can come to their full hearing as often as they want. They can ask for a special hearing. So that's really the only glitch that we have encountered. We have had smooth sailing for 7 years. We've not had any adverse incidents. I really think that is attributed to the fact that we've had so much support. Judge Winkler is our probate court, our probate judge in Hamilton County, and he took the time initially to listen to the challenges that we were having in the community getting these folks treated. He sat down, he asked us the hard questions, he brought us all together. We also have had unwavering support from our mental health board, and obviously the Hamilton County Sheriff's Office is just so supportive, and we are so grateful for their help and their support in this program. And also our inpatient and outpatient providers. We have so much support in Hamilton County for this program that we're being asked to place everybody in the program because they see that it is working. It's not a magic wand, it's not a magic bullet, but it has helped quite a bit. Yes.
Has there been any discussion of integrating clozaril or clozapine into the program?
good question. Well, unfortunately, clozapine is not an injectable, so we don't do anything except long-acting injections.
I wonder if you get to 100% with the treatment-resistant psychosis and then 20% amount.
It's a good thought, but yeah, it has to be in an injectable form. So given our experience in this program and given the data that we've collected, we do believe that it is best practice, and we continue to look for other strategies to help with medication noncompliance, but right now this is the one we have. It's working, and we hope to continue to be successful in it. I really thank you all for asking me to talk about our program today.
The majority of your respondents complete, I know you mentioned, Dr. Smith, that if they're not appropriate, you terminate the outpatient commitment. But past the 90 days, do you see a lot of the respondents continuing on the 2-year commitment, or the demand?
Okay, great question. So the data, Betsy showed you some of that. The data, I believe, shows better outcomes at the 6-month point. The national data. The 90 days, in fact, Judge Stormer and I said if we could be the legislator for a day, we would change the law to up to 180 days from the outset, because that's what the science says. So we have a process by day 75, and I got rid of a lot of the paperwork and made one simple sheet basically years ago. By day 75, the agency has to decide clinically if they want Mr. Jones to be renewed or discontinued. I mostly actually want to know if they want to discontinue him, because sometimes through ADM I hear what's going on with this individual and they think he's great, but I've heard he was in 2 ERs in the last week. And so I can reach back and say, hold on, he's not doing as well as you think he is. That doesn't happen often, but it's happened. But on the other hand, if they need to do renewals, we got to protect their rights and do the paperwork and all the notices and all that. So we've got a pretty good number who they're done in the up to 90-day window. At the other side, we have some individuals who've been renewed every 2 years for the past decade because they do well. Most of them, by the way, beg for it. They do not want to come off. They say, I know myself, and I've talked to some personally because I'm interested in this whole initiative, and they'll tell me, you know, if I stop this, I'm going to relapse. I'll not be adherent with my treatment program, and so I'd really like to stay on it. And they basically, the fancy word I guess is stipulate, right? They're willing to need a hearing. So that's been very good. That's a small group out of the 180. That's probably 10 of the 180. And then there's some in the middle where they come in and they do need a renewal. We promote a 2-year renewal, but that isn't always what happens. But mainly because if you do another 90-day renewal, that's here and gone before you blink. All the paperwork, all the stuff, so we're like, we can end it on day 1, but we prefer you just go ahead now. But I will say that, you know how that works, right? The patient is very upset when they hear up to 2 years. The family is very happy. That's kind of how it plays, right? So, but yeah, great question. So we are always watching this, and we do have a process where the clinicians have to make a decision. So we've got a couple of weeks of time before the 90-day mark hits, so we can have some decision about continuation and so forth. And we did this even through COVID. We just had to keep.
Do you have one AOT monitor for 180 respondents, or do you have multiple AOT monitors?
We have no AOT monitor.
Summit County is unique.
We're unique. So the group of us are constantly in communication. We don't have a person. We've got a team, and the team is constantly monitoring. We've discussed having an AOT. We have a forensic monitor. And people are, why don't you have an AOT monitor? We haven't done that yet. I think that's something we would do if we get to 250, and I'll reach out to you because I'm very interested in the LAI program. I mean, I think if it got bigger, we need it. When we hit 200 a bit, and then we had big discussions about, okay, what are we going to do now? This is too much for the court, it's too much for a couple of people at ADM board, and so forth. So great, it's a very good question. So, I actually have a quick question for you. I'm wondering if, let's say Mr. Jones does the order, signs the order, but doesn't take as long-acting injectable, what's the consequence?
Well, so the first step would be that the case management agency responsible for supervision of that person, they will do everything they can to try and coerce them, coax them to take their injection. And following that, then they notify my office if the respondent continues to refuse, and we do what's called a motion for injection, or I would do the affidavit in support of. That is signed by our board attorney. It goes to the court. But again, communication is essential because this often moves very quickly. So then the deputies will go out, and we also have a conveyor information so they know exactly where to go. If there's any concern about weapons, animals, anything like that, we try to gather all that information. And I would note that the prescription is attached to our motion for injection, so we always know that it's up to date, and that there's a person at the case management agency responsible for keeping all that information current. So then the officers will go out. Importantly, I think it's very important to know this also. One of the things Judge Winkler was very adamant about is force would never be used to initiate an injection motion or order. So the deputies go out, they ask the person if they'll come with them. 9 times out of 10, they go. And just backing up a little bit, just being on the list is a deterrent. That we have like 3 to 5 motions a month with this many people, so it's very low. Most people just, once they know they're on the list, they go get it. But anyway, so once the officers are able to get the respondent, then we're in communication with the case management agency. They always go to the case management agency first for administration of the injection. If the person should become combative in the officer's car, then they will go to our psychiatric emergency service. So this is a partnership with psychiatric emergency services and our case management agencies. So if they're able to get the injection at the agency, then that's great. And if they get there and start acting up, then they go to psychiatric emergency services. And we have all kinds of policies in place. Once if they go to psychiatric emergency services, we will immediately contact the case management agency to get the injection to PES. And make sure that PES knows the case manager's name, number, just a lot of details that happen quickly, but you would just be so surprised how easy it flows. Unfortunately, we don't have any access to state hospital beds in Hamilton County, so the people who are a danger to self and others are on community probate or are on AOT in Hamilton County. It's our only option, and that's why we have an injection program, because we just don't really have any other alternative at this point. But I would say that I am really looking forward to Governor DeWine's task force outcomes, because we have a very critical need in Hamilton County for a higher level of care. A longer acute care hospitalization is just not enough for a small group of these folks who are a danger, and they do need a longer term care in a structured, safe setting such as a state hospital.
And I just want to clarify, I didn't say they weren't a danger to themselves or others. They're not a public safety risk, so they certainly could be a danger to themselves, and certainly, by not getting treatment, they're causing harm to their brain, which is going to be harder to meet, get well again. So, if they're a public safety risk and they're out there and they're threatening the community, then probably not appropriate for AOT.
I wanted to put in, well, first of all, thank you so much to our panelists. Dr. Smith drove 2 hours south and Sarah drove 2 hours north, I think. And all of the members today, the judge, the magistrate, everybody has given up a lot of their time. So we really appreciate that. And a plug for if anybody wants to join the Psychiatry and Treatment Committee, I think we plan on continuing to discuss AOT. And certainly we'd be happy to help spread the word about resources. I was very proud when I was at the National Forensic Psychiatry meeting in Chicago and walked around and found a best practice that was Ohio. So I think that between the work we have, such as what we've heard today, and the governor's task force, that our state is really positioned to be a leader in this solving the competency access crisis. So thank you all, and I'm going to pass it over to Justice Stratton.
Let's give a round of applause again for all of our wonderful presenters. And so thankful for all the time. They put a ton of work into putting this together. There are countless emails flying back and forth with the presenters and making the arrangements here. And again, thanks to Alva's House. And how many did we end up with online? Can you tell us?
We were up to 70 at one point.
70, that's excellent. Very good, very good. So we have decided to reinstate the quarterly the reports of the task force committees. We have 15, so we're going to be fairly short and sweet. And we really appreciate that you will stay and listen to those. We are asking all of our chairs, and I'll send a note out as well, to take your little short report and maybe dress it up a little and give it to Carolyn, because we're going to put together a 2023 report that we will put on the website that has a little short summary of all the different committees, but many of you already have your 3 or 4 points that you can just send in, so that's great. So we are going to start.
So I'm Dr. A.J. McConnell, and the committee is in a transition period. I just took over as co-chair at the beginning of this year in January, and then we also have a new co-chair, Chief Stobert from the Franklin County Sheriff's Office. We're planning some webinars for the jails throughout Ohio for the upcoming year. The 2 topics we've talked about so far are medication assisted treatment for substance abuse, and then also working with individuals with developmental disabilities such as autism in jail settings. So that's my brief update.
So we are very appreciative for you taking over this committee. We started this just to try to train jails on how to use long-term injectables and psychotropic drugs, and now 9 trainings later, we are still going strong, so we spun them off as a separate committee because they're providing a very valuable role.
So we are diversion and reentry, and Andy, if you could raise your hand. So one of my co-chairs, along with Daryl Graves from the Department of Rehabilitation and Correction, we focused a lot on peer supports and increasing access so people can get peer support, and then also working to help people get peer certified. We've also been working with the Department of Medicaid in hopes that that peer support service will be a Medicaid billable service. So more to come on that, specifically for individuals who are getting their peer certification while incarcerated. So that's really the group we're targeting. We're really excited for this summer because there's 2 groups that have a report coming out. The first being the Supreme Court Reentry Task Force that actually Andy and I are both on. And then the Competency Restoration and Diversion Work Group that the governor put together. Both of those reports should be out in June or July, sometime over the summer. And then our committee is going to work with those 2 task force to figure out what we can take the lead on and help support those initiatives and hopefully get them accomplished. And then last, we have our next meeting on May 20th. So if anybody is interested who's not on that, please see me or give me your card and we can add you. We're also going to be collecting training topic areas. There's a need to really have an understanding, and there's so much going on in the space of reentry and diversion. So we want to bring various experts in to train and share information about what's happening with our committee members. And that's it, so thank you.
Education and Stigma Committee, I know they're working a lot on programs. They did some programs for media to help media use the proper terminology and everything. Have you attended those meetings? Maybe you could give a little more report.
I've only attended a little bit. I'm a Carrie Hotel with the AG's office. I've attended a little bit of meetings, and if you know Carrie at all, she has a career. She's had a career in media, and so they entertained a number of folks from different media outlets, mostly in Central Ohio, but some online from across Ohio, and just went through a lot of terminology that's correct to use when reporting on certain situations, and in certain courts or certain various types of wherever people are encountered, and it went really well. So.
I attended the last housing meeting. We got 2 new chairs for that one. Juvenile justice, I believe you've got that one.
I do. Can you hear me? Emily Haynes is one of the co-chairs. One of the other co-chairs is Judge Julie Bruns. And neither of them can be with us today, so they sent along an update. And I'm not going to read the whole thing to you. We're going to put it together with the group of updates, but just to give you a few of the things. Like a couple of other chair or committees, she says they're going to reset their committee focus. They too are new co-chairs, and she is an attorney at the Department of Children and Youth, and Judge Julie Burns is at the Montgomery County Juvenile Court. So they are going to connect with their various agency and courts to try to move some things, but I will talk about, she said they're partnering with agencies and entities with a focus on DYS facilities as a pilot project, and one of the agencies is the new Department of Education and Workforce, which you might see referred to as DO. They connected to leverage both resources with career tech for juveniles. And then the second one was opportunities for Ohioans with disabilities. You'll see it referred to as OOD. They facilitate a meeting between those groups and the OOD contractors to try to currently assess the youth while they're in DYS facilities. Because right now they don't have a very good way of assessing those youth while they're together, while they're in the facilities. And then finally, they hooked up with Aramark, who you might have seen in your local cafeteria. They do food service to DYS, and if you might have heard of a program called Serve Safes, and Aramark teaches Serve Safe, so they are bringing those together to teach Serve Safes, a food service certification that includes food management, inventory control, and fine dining. And this is a career pathway for many people, and they're using Aramark to try to help folks in the facilities to move forward with their career in that area. And that's it.
Good afternoon. My name is Steve Click. I'm the Director of First Responder Wellness for the Ohio Department of Public Safety, and I have the honor of co-chairing this group with Jeff Fudo. We have 25 members currently on the group. We've increased this year by 10, including folks from higher education, criminal justice, behavioral health systems, nonprofits, and other government entities, including Nikki Riley, who is the first responder liaison for Ohio Mental Health and Addiction Services. Our action items were to expand law enforcement's role, and we're continuing to do that, which Jeff will explain here in just a few minutes. Greater support for first responders. We're doing that through the multiple agencies. We're doing a number of trainings around the state of Ohio. We're doing CPT training through the Attorney General's Office for law enforcement officers, putting out a number of videos. We've recently instituted a wellness coordinators group, which are folks working in public safety, both police, fire, EMS, corrections, dispatch, Ohio-based military. We've got a group that meets monthly to share information and so forth, and working with teaching non-specialists to respond and provide needed support. One of the things that we've created is a clinician safety course. As clinicians are being asked to do more out in the communities and stuff, we wanted to make sure that we had a course for their safety because we know that they don't necessarily think the way Jeff and I do when they're going out in the public, and we want them to be able to do that in a very safe environment. Again, my co-chair on this group is Officer Jeff Fudo, who recently retired from the Kent State University Police Department and currently serves as the Public Safety Manager of Kent State University and is the Ohio CIT Coordinator.
If you're, can you hear that? Or is this any better? There we go. If you're interested in any of that information that Stephen talked about, we just finished our report. Ended up being about 11 pages of all the work that is going on around Ohio, so it's pretty impressive. Our goals for 2024 for our subcommittee are confirm members and continue to grow our membership. Complete our 2023 report, which we did. We're going to look at it, and based on the report and some other sources that we have, we're going to identify a few areas and initiatives that we want to focus on, and really provide some support and guidance in those areas. And we also have some ongoing goals, which is making sure all of our members are informed with what's going on around Ohio, and then capturing that activity for the next year. Some potential initiatives that we're looking at. One has to do with mobile crisis team, co-response team, and CITs, and people are often interested in which one they should use and which one best fits for their community. So really looking at why you pick a mobile crisis team, or do you have co-responders, and Doug talked about they're using paramedics and theirs, and why that fits for their community. Information sharing and data collection. We have a lot of great initiatives going around in Ohio where law enforcement is getting involved when they're having contact with people in crisis. Telling people in their community, the mental health, behavioral health agencies, that they're having contact with them. And then also, hoping them they get linked to services so they don't use those criminal justice services anymore, those policing services. And then getting some data on the backside of that and figuring out what we're doing and how do we improve. And also some guidance on emergency hospitalization. We had a great question here about how officers use leads. And often from time with police officers, the people in this room have some questions that they don't really understand. Sometimes it comes with emergency hospitalization and seizure of weapons. It could be when people are under disability, when they aren't under disability. There's lots of different questions as they go through and are trying to apply this, that we can provide them with some type of assistance to figure out how best to do that. And honestly, it usually comes down to having a great policy and a good procedures in place. So, and then also we really want to focus on, again, something with first responder wellness, as that's one of ours as well. So those are the things we're really looking at and we're going to focus on. Our meetings are July 17th and November 20th. And then if anyone's interested, we have some other stuff that's going around. We have a technical assistance session. It's going to be via Zoom. These are through the CJCCOE and sponsored by Mental Health, OMAS, and probably also NAMI. Access to Wellness Program Overview. That's on May 7th. We have the Ohio Crisis Intervention Team Coordinators Meeting. That's on May 20th. That's via Zoom. And a technical assistance session for CIT for Corrections. That's on May 22nd. That is also, I believe that's also via Zoom. And then Ohio Crisis Center Team Coordinators course. That's in person. It's June 24th. And then going into October, it's a 2-day train-to-trainer for CIT and public safety telecommunicators. If you're interested in any of these topics, grab me before I leave, and I can give you the specifics.
Just so you know, our Research and Best Practices Committee, we're really interested in research that looks at the intersection of criminal justice and mental illness. We share information on relevant research and data in our meetings, especially data and research that's specific to Ohio. And then whenever possible, we make that information available to the task force members if we think it's going to be really relevant to you. One of the projects that we're working on, or actually we've already completed, is a compilation of data sources in the state. So we created a comprehensive data source that it contains dashboards, data sets, and reports that we think are relevant to, again, the intersection of mental health and criminal justice. It's mostly state data, and the data resources include things like my agency, which is the Office of Criminal Justice Services for criminal justice data, plus information from OMAS, DRC, DYS, and several other entities. The intended audience for this compilation of data goes beyond just researchers and evaluators to include grant writers, people in policy, people who are developing programs, things like that. So this resource, right now I have it on the OCJS website just because it was easy for me to put it on there, but I think it should be housed somewhere else that would make more sense for all of you to access. So I'm wondering if maybe the task force website, if we could put it on the AG's task force, we'll talk about that possibly. Just want to make sure that you can have access to that resource. Another thing that we're working on is expanding our membership. So we created a flyer for this, and we, in the past 6 months, we've added 7 new members. And I believe I just got another member added a couple of days ago, so it might actually be up to 8 new members. So we are at around 15 or 16 members in our group. It's open to anybody who's interested. So if you do have an interest in being part of this group, just reach out to myself or Natalie Bonfine, who's the other co-chair for our group. And that's all I have.
My name is Dustin McKee. I'm the CEO of the Ohio Psychological Association. We represent Ohio's 3,500 or so licensed psychologists. So we're excited to have CEs here, whoever set it up with OPA. That was very nice. And thanks to Dr. Tilley and Dr. McConnell for being here. And Dr. Gordish, I think she's a member as well, right? Anyway, the Resource and Care Connections Committee is primarily focused on trying to braid those services together that are often kind of stovepiped out there in the community, particularly at the time of discharge from the hospital and the jail. So obviously we want to continue to grow our membership. I did score Rick Tully, though, for those of you who know Rick, that's a big deal. And we've been working on some goals for this coming year to identify and construct a standard template of working with various organizations like Medicaid Managed Care, community mental health centers, federally qualified health centers, the jails, and freestanding hospitals to connect them, to connect folks with SPMI discharged from jail to comprehensive health and mental health care and human services benefits, with an emphasis on scalability and replicability across diverse settings. We have a less lofty goal of examining opportunities to update the existing HIPAA and 42 CFR Part 2 privacy release form to streamline it and consolidate the form to reflect the updates in federal law and state administrative code. So in other words, we'd have one form for HIPAA and 42 CFR now that those laws have been integrated and the rule has been implemented here in Ohio. So that's exciting. And then, you know, more emphasis on integrating the freestanding psychiatric hospitals with the rest of the system. We know that there's significant challenges here. Obviously, our state hospitals are not the front line anymore for civil commitments. And those freestanding hospitals don't necessarily have the same medical record systems that are connected to those CMHCs. And there's some, I think, policy considerations that we need to look through. And I think we were able to see some changes in the system that allow for community mental health centers to do a warm handoff from somebody in the hospital. At this point, they can bill if they come on site, but that's been something that hasn't been there for quite some time. So some of those hospitals might not even realize that they can have those case managers come in right before discharge to make sure that that person continues to receive that psychiatric treatment on an outpatient basis. And then examining the role of probation and developing collaborative opportunities with our community mental health centers and FQHCs and MCOs. The reason that I'm bringing up the federally qualified health centers a lot is because we have something in Ohio called presumptive eligibility for Medicaid. And that allows us to look at the person's adjusted gross income and make sure that if it's 138% or less, we don't have to worry about an asset test or a disability test. We can get that person Medicaid relatively easily and relatively quickly. And then they're able to hopefully get integrated into the higher tier of Medicaid managed care. So I'd be interested, Your Honor, in Dayton to see if you might be able to create a collaborative arrangement with CareSource, because they cover about half of our lives. There used to be a guy named Kieran Hurley over there at CareSource that was able to look at a system. Can't remember the name of the database. What was it? CDP. I think so, yeah. And he could see when his CareSource clients were admitted into jail and discharged from jail. And the idea would be that that would save them a ton of money, because if they're going to jail and leaving a jail, chances are they're going to in the emergency room. And when MCOs get paid up front, you know, they obviously want to avoid the ER. Yeah. So in any case, lots of opportunities, and that's all I've got.
And then veterans is our last one. We're almost to the end. Judge Loxley was going to report by phone. I'm glad he didn't try that now. But he was taking his wife to a special trip in was going to stop and report. I said, you are not going to do that. Don't you dare. So I'll report for him. They're working on 3 main issues. One is Veterans Reentry Search System. Chief Justice Kennedy and I have tried for years to get the jails to adopt this. It's where you send the Social Security numbers at night, every day if you want, to the Veterans Administration. They will identify if you have a veteran in your court system, and they'll send a notice immediately to the Veterans Justice Outreach Specialist, who will reach out and connect them with services. Montgomery County, or Butler County is a perfect example. They had 2 vets identified in jail. They finally decided to put in the VRSS, and within 48 hours identified 20 more. Courts that have very robust veterans courts and screens still miss a third because they won't tell you. And that means all those people that you are using local services for could be connected with VA services. So we have taken the lead from Texas and North Carolina, and we are working for a statute to mandate it. We've found out that the VJOs know how to put the system in. They have a whole manual. They will come and help the jail install it, so it doesn't require any extra funding. And we're going to allow other entities to do it if it's missed somehow at the arrest. But we think the arrest place is the first place to do it because it's the first entry into the system. So we're working on that bill, and we do have several veterans legislator sponsors that would be interested in that. And then we're also going to codify an opinion, Attorney General opinion that Mike DeWine wrote, that said that Veteran Service Commission funds, the $5.5 million that they collect, can be used for funding a person in the Veterans Treatment Court, or for Veterans Court services, or for Veterans Services for someone who's justice involved. And so we're looking to codify that Attorney General opinion as well. Both of those have been approved by the Ohio State Bar Association. Judge Jackson and I are going to present them to the final committee for recommendation that they sponsor, and will be working with their legislative liaison, as well as the Supreme Court's liaison and the office, the Judicial Conference, to try to get those through. There's another act that's been proposed nationally called the Veterans Justice Act, that aims to try to really get veterans into diversion and treatment. It's a very far-reaching act. It's got a little bit of issues that some feel may be overreaching or a little too far. We've got several avenues we can use to expand on that act, like our diversion, our treatment in lieu. It goes beyond veterans courts. It's not to replace veterans courts, but to supplement all those systems that don't have a veterans court. That's a work in progress, so more about that later. But the other 2 we hope to have into bill form sometime this year. So that's the report from the Veterans Commission. Anything you want to add? All right, I wanted to do final thank yous to Carrie and to Mike Sheelight, who planned to be here, and Carolyn in the back, who runs everything. Again, to the Alvis House for all the work that you've done, and to our 4 chairs and Dr. Hunter for all that hard work you put into making this. Pete and Donna have filmed it, and we will put it on my website, which we'll send out in a newsletter link, and to all the committees. And we hope to maybe, sometimes we see if we can get it on the AG website or as at least a link to the channel that it's on, so that you can have that as well. So appreciate you taking the time to do that, very much so. And for all of you that attended both in person and online, we were up to 70-some online, so that's excellent. It means you didn't have to travel. But those of you who are in person that haven't met each other but talked over the phone or Zoom or whatever, say hi before you leave, greet each other. Thank you all for coming, and we are right on time. Thank you.